And for the invocation, Pastor Bruce Grimmish will lead us in prayer.
Father, I want to thank you for another opportunity to represent you. I want to thank you for a county, Lord, that puts emphasis on your wisdom and your direction. And I pray, Father, that you would give that, your wisdom and direction in this meeting, that everything that is accomplished here, Lord, I pray that everything would be done without malicious intent and without contentions. But Lord, bless this meeting and bless the county officials as they represent their districts. And thank you for this opportunity again. And we give you praise, we give you glory. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And thank you. If you follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance, I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Entertain a motion to go into executive session at 9 a.m. on September 3rd.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Buster Johnson, second by Steve Moss, Supervisor Steve Moss. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. We have one presentation this morning, and I'd like to do that presentation before we go to the call of the public. I'd like to recognize Lieutenant Steve Smith from the Bullhead City Police Department. Supervisor Moss, do you have a few words and a presentation to make?
Yes, I believe Supervisor Angus and I both have a, sorry, Hildy, both of us have a few words to say in a presentation we'd like to make. Lieutenant Smith is one of those members of our community who does absolutely everything. She's a lieutenant in the Bullhead City Police Department. When the Mohave County Sheriff Department has conflict or training issues they need to deal with, they bring him in, which is why we're awarding him today. But speaking as members of the community, Lieutenant Smith is also one of those pillars of our community. I don't know a busier man in Bullhead City and Fort Mohave, Arizona than Lieutenant Smith. If it involves his church, whether it involves youth activities or any of the other dozen functions he's involved in, Lieutenant Smith is always there. And I believe that is why Mohave County is honoring him today.
I'll just echo what Supervisor Moss said. I'm very proud of our Bullhead City Police Department and the Mohave County Sheriff's Department. And where is he? Is he here?
There.
Okay.
Come on down.
Moss to look this way too, thank you.
Okay, now we'll do the call to the public. Those wishing to address the board, let's call the public regarding matters not on the regular agenda. We'll have already produced a form requesting to speak. Comments are restricted to items not on the agenda with the exception of the consent agenda and must relate to matters within the jurisdiction of the board. Mr. Frederick Williams. Morning, sir. If you'll state your name and address.
My name is Frederick Williams. I live at 8331 West Oatman Road, Golden Valley, Arizona, 86413. Good morning, Chairman Watson,
Good morning, sir.
Supervisors. I was wondering if the at the last Supervisors, under when they had General Manager Ron Walker, they visited the county general plan and gutted it. Words, wherever it said will do something, they changed it to may or shall. The general plan is for the county, not for any group or certain people in the county. It's for the county as a whole itself, not the people in the county, but to make the county itself grow and prosper. I was wondering if the legislator said that the general plan wasn't to be addressed until 2015. I was wondering if you were going to readdress it again, or if you would just go back and correct the things that Ron Walker and the former supervisors changed on it. We had workshops, and the majority of the people in those workshops, I know up here in Kingman, were opposed to any changes on it, but they went through with the changes anywhere. I was ashamed to see how it was gutted. They made it just worthless, and I hope you'll address it again and correct any problems with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and I recall that day very well. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Supervisor Johnson?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, I'm sorry. We have another presentation, Digital County Survey Award.
it's an ACO award.
Nathan, how in the world could I forget you?
I don't know. Morning, Chairman, members of the board. I'm here before you today to talk about a National Association of Counties Award. It's called the Digital County Survey, and Mohave County took 9th place in the nation in the population category, 149,000 to 249,000. It's a great honor for our county, and it's a recognition of the hard work and dedication of the staff and employees that we have in the Information Technology Department. It's validation that what we're doing is, I guess, the right thing. You know, we're enhancing services, we're being innovative, and we're doing it with less. You know, as the years go by and then revenue streams seem to get less and less and less, we're still able to provide these fantastic services. And it's, you know, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to do that, and setting some priorities for us and challenging us to raise the bar here in the county. So I have an award right here. I'd like to maybe get a photo op with you guys, and I have 4 members of the team from IT right here. Unfortunately, we couldn't have everybody here because we have a really small department, and we support close to 1,000 county employees on any given day. So Mondays is probably not the best time to shut down the IT department and bring them all down here. So wanted to present the award to you.
Well, let's go up and get a picture taken.
What do you want, me to shoot this way with the emblem in the background? Okay, goes fine. Kind of squeeze in. Okay, everybody look here, please. We're missing something. Okay, we're going to shoot a couple more so I make sure everybody's eyes are open. Smile. Thank you.
Just want to say, Mr. Chairman, that IT does a terrific job, and of all people, I probably need them the most. And they do answer the call every time. Thank you very much, Nathan, and your group.
Fantastic group, and thank you. Okay, now we'll move to the consent agenda. Supervisor Johnson, do you have any items to remove?
Not at this time, no.
Supervisor Angus?
Nope.
Supervisor Brotherton?
No?
Supervisor Moss?
Yes, I would like to remove items 8, 26, 27, and 28.
8, 26, 27, and 28.
Correct.
Chair would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve with consent minus items 8, 26, 27, 28.
Second.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson, and seconded by Supervisor Angus. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 8, proposed settlement of Coker Ellsworth versus Mohave County.
The only reason I pulled this, Mr. Chairman, is because I have an attorney-client relationship with Coker Ellsworth, and I did not want to be voting on this particular item. So I believe the correct process is for me to step to the side. Is that right, Mr. Ekstrom?
Something in writing.
Okay. I'm going to abstain from this particular item.
Okay, great. Chair would entertain a motion.
I move to approve item 8, approve the proposed settlement of Coker Ellsworth versus Mohave County.
I'll second the motion. Noted that Supervisor Moss is removed from the discussion and the voting on this item. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item 26.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I asked that items 26, 27, and 28 be pulled is not that I have any particular difficulty with the project itself. It's just over the last several months, we've seen many of these contracts come before us with contingencies, and I would prefer to see, and I believe we can consider 26, 27, and 28 as a whole, is that if we approve these items, that we instruct the administration, county administrator, to come back to us on a roughly monthly basis and give us a report as to how deep into those contingencies our spending is going. I'd like to know, I'd like to gather a database in my own mind, a series of transactions to see whether or not we're habitually going into the contingency, in which case maybe our bid process needs to be reformed. Are we coming under contract, maintaining the same? It's for informational purposes, essentially.
Okay.
So if I could be allowed, I'd like to submit a motion to approve items 26, 27, and 28 with the proviso that on a monthly basis, the county administrator is to report back to the board as to any contingency funds which are expended on these items or future items which may come to the board.
Second.
We have a motion by Supervisor Moss and a second by Supervisor Johnson, 26, 27, and 28. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried unanimously. That completes our consent agenda. We'll move on to item number 30, presented by Sheriff Tom Sheehan, Mohave County Sheriff's Office. Open the public hearing for the discussion, possible action, authorizing the submittal of a grant application and accept funding from the BJA fiscal year 13 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Award Grant Program. Do we have someone here from the Sheriff's Office? Please come on down.
I'm Lieutenant Tim Sonnier with the Sheriff's Office. Do you have questions in reference to the grant, or just want an overview?
Just a quick overview.
Bureau of Justice Assistance grant provides funds based on UCR reporting for crimes that occur within the county. every year. This year, we've elected to try and use the money to purchase portable radios to issue to our deputies. Funding was $13,514 for this year.
Okay. Do we have any questions for the lieutenant? There being no questions, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you, Lieutenant, and entertain a motion for discussion.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve, Supervisor Johnson.
Second.
We have a second from Supervisor Moss. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried unanimously. Item number 31, sitting as the Board of Directors from Mohave County Television District. We have the discussion, possible action regarding the approval of award, contract number 13P-03, maintenance service for Mohave County TV translator system to WECOM, Inc., Incorporated of Kingman, Arizona, for the initial one-year term effective July 21st, 2013, with the option to renew the contract for 4 additional one-year periods or portions thereof for the monthly fee of $16,244.94. This item was continued from the July 15th, 2013 meeting.
Motion to discuss?
We have a motion for discussion
Second.
and a second by Supervisor Moss. Supervisor Angus.
Okay, this was continued. I asked for it to be taken off for another month. There's actually, I think, 3 parts to this, and that is whether the county has the obligation to provide a television signal. There is the matter of the rate that the taxpayers pay, and then there's the matter of the contract itself. I'm going to vote for this today, but I'm asking staff this year to do a survey to reassess the use and to come back with a rate next year that makes sense, that we're just paying, our taxpayers are only paying what is needed to maintain those towers. And then part of that will be finding out if we are paying the right cost for that contract. It's been many, many, many years, same vendor. I know it's a highly technical part of the technology is very difficult, but as I understand it, there are companies out there now that do similar things. I would request that all of those different things be looked into.
If I could, Mr. McChairman?
Certainly. Supervisor Moss.
Just to clarify for the public, and I'm not certain if this should be directed to Mr. Hendricks or Mr. Ekstrom, is the option to renew for 4 additional one-year periods, that option rests with Mohave County, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Moss, that's correct.
So essentially, we're agreeing to a one-year contract and potentially 4 additional one-year contracts if we decide to and no one else.
That's correct.
And that means, for the public's edification, that gives time for Supervisor Angus's decision or effort to look into the actual expenses and potential modification of the rate and potential using another vendor if that tends to be appropriate. Would I be correct on that also, Mr. Hendricks?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moss, if I may, I would like you to include in your motion that the option to renew would be at the request of the county, so that's clarified.
Okay.
Would you do that?
So do I go ahead? I move to approve the award of contract number 13-P-03, the maintenance service for Mohave County TV translator system to WECOM, Inc., Kingman, Arizona, for an initial one-year term effective July 21st, 2013, with the option to renew the contract by the Board of Supervisors for 4 additional one-year periods or portions thereof for the monthly fee of $16,244.94, and to instruct staff to reassess the rate of the TV district and other further options for additional vendors.
Second.
We have a motion
You
by,
got something on that?
Well, I have a question on that, Mr. Chairman.
certainly, Supervisor. Johnson?
We just have in front of us the contract, what Supervisor Angus wants to do would be under a separate item when they come back on instead of on this one. We didn't agendize to go back and do these other things. Yeah, you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Johnson, I think the conditions she's placed on it are reasonable, and she can request the manager to do it without bringing it back. I just wanted to make sure the words about the option were in there because I don't have the contract in front of me.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion from Supervisor Angus and a second by Supervisor Moss. There are two people that would like to speak to this issue. First being Greg Bushy.
Thank you for the opportunity. You guys stole all my thunder, so
Please state your name and
I'll be
address.
back next year. Greg Bucci, I live at 3801 East Ryan Avenue in Butler. And again, I'll see you next year, I guess, because you've already stole my thunder. So I am for the contract because there's an awful lot of folks out there that need this service. And we are paying for it by our property taxes. And thank you for providing it, or via the taxes. And I'll see you next year.
Thank you, Mr. Bushy.
Thank you.
Leroy Wisinger.
Leroy Wissinger, 3842 Schaefer, Kingman, Arizona. And you've probably already done what I wanted you to do, but I still like to make some comments on it.
Certainly.
Mr. Watson, members of the Board of Supervisors. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for the work that you've done as citizens for Mohave County. I like the way the 5 board members are working. I would like to take a stand and make some comments in regards to the county TV district. First of all, I'm glad that I have a choice of free TV or pay for the privilege of watching TV. I get clear pictures, good news, educational programs for children, Arizona Public Broadcasting from ASU, and World Journey programs, and a variety of other programs from the county and TV district. I may be a so-called minority for using it, but no one at this point can say how large our minority can be. If the reasoning for eliminating the taxes for the county free TV district is why tax the majority for the few, we want to decrease taxes, then we need to look at other areas where the majority are being taxed for the minority. Let's look at the Mohave County Library District. I'm sure only a minority of the county residents use the library. The reasons for going to the library can now be found on modern technology of internet, iPads, laptops, and cell phones. These new technologies are all over in our homes, so it won't be long before our libraries will be obsolete and only used by a few of our residents. Do we want to cut our free libraries? Another way we can cut taxes, because only a few of our residents are using the program, is the Western Arizona Vocational Education Program. The majority of the taxpayers do not use this program, so why tax the majority? Even graduates of the program do not stay in Mohave, but go to Las Vegas or Phoenix for better paying jobs. To sum this up, if the reason to cut the county TV district because only a few of the residents are using it, then we should cut the Mohave County Library District and the Western Arizona Vocational Education District. I am a former school teacher, having taught in Lake Havasu and the Kingman High School and the Mohave Community College. And I have been a businessman in Mohave County for over 30 years. And for the record, I am strongly not in favor for eliminating any of the 3 tax districts that I have talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 32, discussion, possible action regarding the adoption of the 2013-14 tax levies and rates for Mohave County tax authorities and acknowledge the tax levies for special districts, school districts, fire districts in accordance with ARS 42-17-151 and 42-17-254. Motion for discussion?
Motion to discuss?
Second.
We have a motion by Supervisor Angus for discussion, a second by Supervisor Johnson for discussion. Supervisor Angus.
I've gotten several calls and comments about the Mohave Community College. It seems that every year the tax rates go up. And is Ron Nicholson here? I saw him earlier. Did he leave? Is there anyone who could speak for Mohave Community College here? Well, that's unfortunate. Well, that was one I wanted to talk about, and just on a personal note for my district, proud that the Bullhead City Fire Department did not raise their rates this year. I know that the Bullhead Elementary School District did, and I know they have their reasons, and I encourage everyone to go to these board meetings. And again, the county did not raise their rates, so when you get your bills, please see your separate districts.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Johnson.
Just to add on to Supervisor Angus's, I believe in the levies we have before us, there are 32 increases and 38 decreases, and the list of ones we'll be accepting today.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, and this is again just for the edification of the viewing public, Mohave County is not raising any tax rate this year. We're maintaining the same, and we maintained the same, I believe, the year prior. So if there is any increase in any tax bills, it's because of these other smaller elected official districts that I would encourage their citizens to participate in.
Thank you, Supervisor Moss. Thank you for noting that. Mr. Timko is not available this morning.
Mr. Chairman, Diane Melendez from his office can speak on any questions that the board may have.
Okay. Before we do that, I'd like to invite Mr. Walker to the stand, please. If you'd like to speak to this issue.
I'm Bill Walker. I live at 3274 Pack String Lane, Kingman, Arizona. I've been in the county for 42 plus years. I've observed a lot. All I know is my taxes have basically doubled in the last 10 years of many of the items that we're discussing. Now, it doesn't make any difference how much mine went up, but none of them went down. This is only true of some lots that I own outright in Rancho Santa Fe. And I'm sure everybody else's taxes have gone up by 100% in 10 years. I question why. And secondly, I think the board has to do with a lot of the taxes, like approving the community college tax, the county tax, fire district tax, flood control tax, library district, TV district. I know that's not much on my part, but there are many, many people that pay a lot more in taxes than I do, and I know theirs have also doubled. I encourage the board to not approve any additional taxes this year and in the future years to take a very close look at these taxes keep going up. I don't think in 10 years I feel there is one person in this room has doubled their income by 100%, yet the tax bite has doubled. How many years can this continue in this county? That's all I have to say. I have one more comment. I'm glad, extremely glad, that we don't have to go through the security to come into this building. I want to thank those responsible as the Board of Supervisors in this room.
That's the number one item, was on my agenda years ago. It will remain on my agenda. You should not have to pay or be processed, fished, ask to see your wallet, see what's in your wallet to come into this room or into this county building or any county building, except possibly the Superior Court, and that would be it. I thank you much for doing that, whoever was responsible. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Walker, for your comment.
Chairman, may I say something?
Certainly. Supervisor Angus.
Just again, for the edification, these rates that are set by elected boards, they come before us, and can we vote no if we don't agree?
Mr. Exton?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Angus, the role of the board in approving tax rates for other districts is ministerial. So really, you really don't have the authority to go through them item by item and change them. It's functioning, that's the laws of the state of Arizona. The whole tax package goes through the board, but the board only has discretion over its component of that tax package.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Moss.
I believe what Mr. Ekstrom's saying is acknowledged within the form of the motion. When it comes to the special districts, the school districts, and the fire districts, we're only acknowledging receipt of their setting of a tax levy. We're not approving it. They approved their own tax rate. This board that you're speaking to now has 4 taxes that we control directly. The county property tax, the fire, excuse me, I haven't gotten that now, the flood control district, the TV district, and the library district. Those are only 4 we control, and not a single one of those have been raised for the last 2 years. It's the school boards and the fire districts which have been raising your taxes. And if you have a complaint with the school boards, the fire districts, because of the tax rates, you need to become involved in those smaller, I shouldn't say smaller, but those more local forms of government. All we're doing is acknowledging that they sent us that tax rate. We're not approving it.
Thank you, Supervisor Moss.
I echo everything that Supervisor Moss said, and it is, if you ever go to any of those board meetings, you'll be shocked by how few people are there. So please get involved in the process. And with that, I make a motion to adopt the FY 2013-14 tax levies and rates for Mohave County tax authorities and acknowledge the tax levies for special districts, school districts, and fire districts in accordance with ARS 42-17151 and 42-17254.
I second the motion.
We have a motion from Supervisor Angus and a second from Supervisor Brotherton. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried unanimously. Item number 33, discussion and possible action, approve the proposed reorganization to create a waste disposal services division in the Development Services Department under the directions of a professional engineer and transfer the county landfills management services from the Public Works Department and the on-site septic disposal services from the Environmental Health Division of Public Health Department to the Developmental Services Department. Authorize the county administrator in cooperation with the Development Services Director to develop any necessary new employee classifications, implement the transferring of staff between departments, and restructure duties to work towards a more efficient and effective organization that will provide better customer service to our citizens and the development of our community. Motion for discussion?
So moved.
We have a motion from Supervisor Moss. I'll second that motion for discussion. Anyone wishing to speak to that item?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Supervisor Moss.
This is more akin to an inquiry to Mr. Hendricks. I see as part of this reorganization, which I thoroughly approve of, by the way, when it comes to one-stop shopping for development and construction, I think that's an excellent idea. But I see there's a waste disposal services division that's being created. Will that have anything to do with wastewater, or is it just the hard material that we find in our landfills?
Mr. Hendricks?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Moss, part of this process will involve designating this particular branch that we're going to be creating as a health services branch underneath Development Services. This is something that is in statute for the delegation agreement and something that the rest of the counties have actually established to comply with the state law in allowing development services to the different counties to provide this one-stop shop. What we're also doing, because of special expertise that we have, that in Nick Hunt and also in staff, we're going to be shifting our landfill division over to development services and having it be an all-inclusive, for lack of a better term, mini Arizona Department of Health Services organization within the county. One of the things that this will allow us to do, just to expand a little bit, is we are wanting to get into water and wastewater expansions so that these types of permitting now won't have to go down to the state and be burdened by that process, and we'll be able to take care of those services in-house by Mohave County and aid our development community in their permitting. So we're also going to be consolidating the inspectors and training our inspectors, building inspectors, to be inspectors for the septic tank. So instead of sending out personnel from separate agencies and incurring that cost, we can possibly consolidate some of the inspections so that they're done by one very well-trained or several very well-trained individuals. And like I said, it's going to make us a more effective and efficient organization, I believe, or I wouldn't be proposing it to the Board of Supervisors. And I think it's going to be a good move for our development community.
If I could, Mr. Chairman. I agree with your comments, Mr. Ekstrom, that it will make us far more efficient from a developmental and business standpoint, and I applaud your efforts there. The reason I brought wastewater up specifically is I attended a seminar a few weeks ago, or actually it's only a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Time is blurring together. And we in Arizona are not, I think, fully conversant with the water issues, negative water issues that we'll be facing within the very near term. Anyone who's been watching the water levels at Lake Powell and Lake Mead should be aware that there'll be some issues there. There's our ways of managing and improving our situation. Wastewater is one of those ways. I would encourage the county administration to look into that a little more to see what we can do without stifling development, because development and jobs have to be our number one concern in this economy. But there's a potential resource that we're wasting that we need to be looking at in order to improve our water situation.
Thank you, Supervisor Moss.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor
Thank
Angus?
you again. I think that's a great idea. Anything that's going to streamline our permitting and for our builders and our community, I am for that. And as I understand it, Mohave County is the only county who still has the process that goes through the state. Am I right in that?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Angus, I'm not positive about that particular point, but I know the majority of the counties do have their septic permitting, and only septic permitting under development services. We've researched that. What we're proposing to do is what you're mentioning. I think we're going to be ahead of the curve. We're going to be on the leading edge of the rest of the counties by training our people and moving into water and wastewater expansion, which I'm not sure the rest of the counties are doing. But we're also going to be, just so the board knows, contracting engineering services, same as we do when we receive a building plan that's really outside of our technical expertise. We have a list of contractors that we provide those building plans for review to, and they provide that service to Mohave County. We're going to be doing something similar once we get approved by Arizona Department of Environmental Quality to provide this service. We're going to be doing something very similar to, for lack of a better term, farm out some wastewater and water expansion reviews. And that'll tremendously help, I think, our community. They won't be waiting for the state of Arizona to approve their processes.
How long do you think that process is going to take?
I would have to defer to Nick, but if he can, Nick believes that at least we'll be trained for septic, I believe, in 6 months. Is that correct? I guess not, so if you'll indulge us.
Morning, Director.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Angus. It will take a little while, and if I may explain it a little bit, like Mike mentioned, we want to combine the inspection services and using our building inspectors to inspect septic tanks, for example. And so the building inspectors, they are bright people. They inspect large buildings, but they need to be educated and certified to inspect septic. So our plan is we have just a wonderful, excellent individual in Public Works, an environmental engineer, and he is applying right now. He'll be a national instructor, so be able to give them national certificates. But that takes time. That's about a 3-month process. The other issue is that we need to work with ADEQ, get a new delegation agreement, and even though it's going to be very similar, say, to Yavapai County, but it still takes time on their part, and we'll be bringing back to the board for approval. And that takes some time also. And these are the time-consuming issues, and so basically I'm thinking about 6 months. We'll try to do it as fast as we can, and like Mike mentioned, also want to have some consulting engineers on contract on, like Supervisor Moss mentioned, sewer systems, sewer treatment systems, sewer collection systems that probably might be overwhelming for us, so we need to have some contracts. So we need to go out, get an RFQ, and have some contracts in place, bring it back to you. So these are the time-consuming issues. I would estimate it would take about 6 months. The landfills we could take over today. That's a very smooth transition. It's excellent. There's excellent management for both of these, but the landfills is a very smooth. I used to do the landfills when I was at Public Works. I used to design the landfills.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Any further questions for Mr. Hunt?
I don't know if I have a question for Mr. Hunt, but Mr. Hendricks, what is happening to our, what do we call it, public health now? This is where septics used to be under, was public health?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Johnson, that's correct.
So we're doing away with all the people we have in public health and transferring them to engineer?
If I can have Nick come up, because I don't have the exact, we are transferring, I believe, a permit technician over from public health, and also, Nick, could you help me out on explaining it?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Johnson, and actually, if I may correct, it's, if I understand that there's a public health issue and there is an environmental issue, ADEQ. This program is under Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, so it's not under the Arizona Health Department. And even though it's combined in environmental health, and so as far as the personnel, we looked at it, and if we have an engineering manager, we will still need some help with existing septic tanks that fail. The new ones will be inspected by the building inspectors, and that's the most efficient way, just one inspector and make a very smooth transition. But the existing ones, so looked at the workload, Rachel gave me the workload, and that could be easily handled by one inspector. So that's what we have in mind. And then in addition to that, there's a lot of record keeping and permitting, so probably take another permit technician over from the health department. That's what we have in mind currently, in addition to the people that are coming from Public Works.
So are we adding people, or are we going to subtract people from the public health and then move them over to this new?
Well, yeah, we like I explained, I think what we're thinking about moving 2 people from Public Health and 2 people from Public Works. And that will be pretty much where we're going to start with this whole division, and I think we can manage it, and not asking for any extra funds or any extra money. I think actually in the long run, it's going to be savings because of the simplified procedures.
So you're saying, so I get this straight, 4 people are going to handle all of our septic issues and all that, and no longer will the health department have anything to do with septics?
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out. These 4 people won't be able to do all the inspections, so we're counting on the building inspectors. All the building inspectors will be properly trained, and they will do the day-to-day inspection, the bulk of it, and also the plan reviewers. We have 3 already development services. They will be properly trained, and they will handle the plan reviews, and then it will go up to an engineer if we need it. And but the management of the system will be only by 2 people, a manager and probably an admin support, and then maybe add 2 people from environmental health and the building inspectors. And they will have to work very closely with the building division. But we have some really good people there. Ron Durgan came from Cochise County, and he's our chief building official, and he contacted Cochise County. They went through the same system exactly, and where the building inspectors are doing the inspections, and he reported that they doing very good results and actually cost savings.
Now, you're not planning on giving all these people a pay raise because you have them doing another inspection, are you?
No, like I said, there's no funds and no money required. But
there's no reclassification involved in this.
Well, there might be a reclassification to. Actually, I see one reclassification coming that we're going to ask for is to create a manager. Right now, the landfill division is run by an environmental engineer. He's doing an excellent job. He's been doing it for at least 13 years since I've been here, and he could step up to be a manager, and then he is the only person that I would recommend for reclassification.
Now you're talking about taking over ADEQ's jobs. Who's paying for that? The state pays for that now. Why do we want to burden the taxpayer with?
No, the state is not paying for that. The ADEQ
They
charges.
charge for it.
Oh yeah. So we would charge the same fee or less fee. That would be our limit. That our fees, the difference will be people can come in, developers can come in, or builders, and deal with us instead of going down to Phoenix. And then we could guarantee a faster turnaround, more customer service, and for the same fees or less. I'm confident we can do it for less than the EQ.
But I don't understand if the state does this now, why are we taking on the responsibility when you're already saying that we're going to have outside contractors to do this job? If the state does it, why are we burdening and taking on the responsibility for the county to do that when somebody else is already covering it?
Just to give convenience to the local developers and builders so they don't have to go to Phoenix. And in addition to that, I don't know the state, how fast they work. I worked a lot with DEQ when I was a consulting engineer, 22 years in California, but I did a lot of work here in Arizona. They are extremely slow and hard to respond and hard to find the right people and have to travel to Phoenix to meet them. And so we would offer the local services. We would guarantee a deadline. We make up these engineering contracts. They would have to respond, say, within a week instead of within 2 months. I mean, it could be a tremendous benefit for the developers.
In all the years I've been here, I've never had anybody complain about getting anything through ADEQ. Not one complaint. I don't see the need for us to assume responsibilities that gives the county the obligation. That's what bothers me. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Moss, or Supervisor Johnson. Chair would entertain a motion for.
I move that we approve the proposed reorganization to create a waste disposal service division in the Developmental Services Department under the direction of a professional engineer, and transfer the county landfill management services from the Public Works Department and the on-site septic disposable services from the Environmental Health Division of the Public Health Department to the Development Services Department, and authorize the county administrator in cooperation with the Development Services Director to develop any necessary new employee classifications, implement the transferring of staff between departments, and restructure duties to work towards a more efficient and effective organization, and I will add, more cost-effective organization that will provide better customer services to our citizens and the development community.
I second the motion.
We have a motion by Supervisor Moss and a second from Supervisor Brotherton. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Item number 34, discussion, possible action, approve the legislative proposals for Mohave County's 2014 legislative program allowing for additional items to be brought to the Board of Supervisors for consideration.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion for approval
Second?
and a second. Motion for approval from Supervisor Angus and a second from Supervisor Moss.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, just for a moment,
Supervisor Moss.
for those watching, this has to do about us getting our fair share of SILF funds, as I read the backup data, which the state has been withholding from us for a number of years.
Correct.
This means more money to the county.
Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 35, discussion and possible action, approve the appointment of Rashida Sumaniski to the position of Mohave County Public Fiduciary, effective August 19th, 2013, at range 22, step 3, at $62,857.60 annually, in accordance with ARS 14-5601A, which requires that the Board of Supervisors shall appoint a public fiduciary.
Motion to approve?
We have a
Second.
motion from Supervisor Angus,
Second?
second from Supervisor Moss. Discussion. There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 36, authorize the pay rate adjustment for the Human Sources Director, Elections Director, Chief Probation Officer, and Court Administrator to pay range 29 with no salary increase, and authorize the pay range adjustment to pay range 29, Step 1, for the Procurement Director to pay range 29 or $80,246.80 annually.
A motion to discuss?
Second?
Motion for discussion from Supervisor Angus and a second from Supervisor Moss. Supervisor Angus?
I am still very confused, and I'm new to this whole, the way governments are set up in their pay and the steps and the ranges, and you can get a range up or you don't get any extra money. And what I'm concerned about is that all of these things that's coming before us, I know it comes before us, is all at the higher levels, the directors. I want to make sure that it's being done fairly across the board in all departments. So is Ray Asunya here? Can you come down? You know, I know we here at the board level, we hear the stuff about the directors and whatever, and I think it is confusing to people. And I just want everybody to understand that whatever's happening at the director level, as far as reclassifications, is also happening and at lower levels. And I am not convinced of that. So that's what I'm asking you to explain.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Angus, what we have done actually since I've been here, is have discussions to make all department directors that report to the county administrator and now the Board of Supervisors at a very minimum range. And that's been my recommendation for several years. So I think as the county administrator and I talked over the last couple of weeks, this is an attempt to recognize regardless of the function, the responsibility and accountability of each director, whether they be a director or a manager. Now, the question is that being applied throughout the organization vertical? That is only being applied as we study individual jobs that focus in on whether they're changed, what their level of accountability is. But generally speaking, we cannot do a comprehensive assessment of the vertical structure of the organization unless, as Mr. Hendricks recommended a couple of meetings ago, we do a countywide classification study.
that is a little more intensive, a little more comprehensive. So right now, we kind of do it through the budget process in terms of the Board of Supervisors approving job audits. But to answer your question, Ms. Angus, no, we are not doing that from top to bottom because of resources. And that, as Mike said last meeting, that would require a comprehensive job classification study.
Well, what does that entail? And to get that done, what stops us from doing that?
It is to be done, Mrs. Angus, for it to be done, it requires classification experts that would come in and do an assessment. First of all, the process would be to meet with department heads, meet with the board, meet with focus groups to identify what values in each job we value. And then through their statistical methods, like multiple regressions and things that, quite frankly, I don't understand, come up with a salary structure in terms of evaluating numerically each job factor. As an example, you look at the knowledge and education of every job, whether it's me or an office clerk. That's a factor. Then you look at problem solving. What kind of problems does an office assistant make as compared to mine? Accountability. What's the accountability of an office assistant in the job he or she does, and what's mine? Those are three fundamental factors. Depending on the system, it could be upwards of 7. That requires very specialized professional people to do that. Right now, on our staff, we don't have that kind of expertise.
So what unprofessional method do we use now?
We use what's called a whole job ranking system. We try to kind of measure across the organization like positions. We work with the subject matter experts, which are the departments, my staff, but that is very unscientific. It basically looks at internal equity between positions.
Okay. What did we use for the directors that we're voting on today? What method?
We looked, based on my recommendation over the last few years, at regardless of the size, regardless of the function, all departments under the board or the county administrator are responsible for managing a department, a function, regardless of the number of people. Right now, we're focusing on departments that have very important impact, but the numbers of staff may not be the same as compared to department heads that require a license or a certification, like Public Works Director, Development Services. So this is an attempt just to make equal all the job of the department directors that are very important regardless of the function.
I was also told that reclassifications were done during the budget process. So as a percentage, how many of those reclassifications had raises attached to them?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Angus, I am doing that analysis right now. We haven't really looked at the budgetary impact because when they're approved in the budget, they're approved at a certain fund level, but that's the ultimate range is contingent on the actual study and recommendation by my staff.
Because when we were approached about the 2.5% COLA raise, we were told that, because nobody's gotten a raise for so many years, and then I was told that, yeah, people were getting raises, and now it's gotten all complicated if you got a raise in the last 6 months and all this stuff. So I have to tell you that this, not only is this really confusing, I'm more mixed up today than I was when we started this process. And I don't understand, it doesn't seem like it should be all that complicated, and it should be easily explained. And I'm even more confused than I was before you even got up here. So I don't even know what to say, but sort of my gut tells me that until it's all figured out, that we shouldn't be picking and choosing which departments to reclassify starting from the top down. That's my concern, and that's where I'm going to leave it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, and just to try to add on to what Ray said, our merit rules that we work under actually have a provision that allows an employee, if the employee believes that they're being worked out of class, to request a reclassification. And if there's funds available or funds can be budgeted, and we believe that there's merit through the department director that that employee is being worked out of classification, we do a classification study on that particular employee. And what we did in the budget process, through the budget process, is on these requests, like we had a number of requests from the library to do reclassifications because they believe that they're working their employees out of classification. The first thing we look at is it a necessity for the organization? If we find that it is, and it's a functional necessity, and there's monies available or monies are budgeted through the budget process, then we authorize a reclassification study on that employee. And that study may or may not show that the employee should be reclassed, or it may or may not show that that employee would get a raise. And what we've done is put a number of requests into the budget process and asked the board to approve that with the budget process. That's why I said there's a number of reclasses that are going to be done with that budget approval.
One last question. What's the status of the library reclassifications?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Angus, we have completed all the job audits that were built into the budget for this fiscal year. My staff and I will be scheduling a meeting with Julie Javier and our new library director, Kathy Pinnell. I talked to Kathy Pinnell last week, and so we need to make our recommendations to her to see what she intends in terms of her organizational structure and her staffing allocations. And I hope to have that meeting with her on Wednesday.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Supervisor Moss?
I don't have any questions for Mr. Osuna, but this is, I'm going to make, I guess, two observations about this. The only, and this classification for upper management, the only upper management level individual who is going to get a raise would be the procurement director.
That's correct.
And I could say from my personal observations, having dealt with her department from time to time and having been down there from time to time, that probably is the sole position looking at things that I could say with some level of confidence is probably undercompensated for the work that that individual does. So I have absolutely no problem with giving an increase to the procurement director, and I think that she deserves it from what I can see. Now, here's the negative side of things. When I translated what you just said, Mr. Osuna, is that there's a whole lot of voodoo that goes into these reclassification studies. There's not a lot of objective data that goes into it. And me as an attorney, when I want to argue one position or the other, I don't need to really know. You can argue the pros and the cons, and so what result you want determines the process you get there for making your pitch, of what I'm hearing, as to whether an employee actually gets a raise or not. So I will say flat out that I don't trust these reclassification studies, and the only reason I'm okay with giving a pay increase to the procurement director is I think they are, or she is, underpaid for what she does. So that's the only thing I'm basing my thoughts on this issue on, not these reclassification studies.
I have a question.
Supervisor Brotherton?
Okay. Mr. Osuna, from what I understand, too, many of these reclassifications or recommendations come from the department head or the director of that department. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Brotherton, yes, ma'am, you are correct.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at is an organization as big as this is why we have directors and department heads to make these recommendations, because they are they're really seeing their employee and what their employee is doing. I know since there was a hiring freeze, there are employees that probably are working in a class way above the class that they're being paid for. So I do know that there have been, because I've talked to some of the employees myself in the lower echelon, if you want to call it that have been reclassified simply because their department head or their supervisor or their director felt that they were doing a lot more work than actually what they were getting paid for. So there has been some of that movement going on for a long, long time. not just the directors. So I think this is where the confusion comes in. I don't know. I guess we're going to have to decide, do we really take a department head or a director's opinion on whether one of their employees needs to be reclassified or deserves a raise, or because of their evaluation should be being paid more, or are we going to adopt some other method by which we do this? That's all I have.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one more thing. I think the
Supervisor Angus?
confusion for me came in because for the last several months, all I've heard was that there have been no raises, and, we toiled about the 2.5%, but then now it's sort of the last minute being told that this has been ongoing and that people have, and so it's just been confusing.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Arcino?
No,
Supervisor Moss?
we're different people. I want to echo what our Supervisor Angus said, is that I think there's some word games get played sometime. The employees that had a raise forever, et cetera, and then we find out significant chunks of the employees have had raises. They just call it reclassification, so we're not really considering that to be a raise. When it comes to, because they got the additional money for additional work, which is fair enough, but they did get additional money, and I think sometimes it's a shell game. We're swapping the labels. When it comes to this item 36, though, not one of the management staff who are listed in that item are actually getting a raise, with the exception of the procurement director. And I think it's important to keep our eye on that ball, is that some people are getting a range increase, but they're a step decrease. They come out to be budget neutral. The only one who is effectively getting additional money is the procurement director, which I think is very well deserved. I'm not slighting the other department heads who are on that list. I think long-term, getting that range helps them, so there's a benefit there for them. But when it comes to this item, I think it's a positive step forward to recognizing the one employee on that list of 5 who actually does deserve a pay increase. I'm not going to call it a reclassification. I'll call it what it is. It's a pay increase. And so I would like to move that we approve item 36 of the agenda.
I second the motion.
We have a motion by Supervisor Moss and a second by Supervisor Berthinen
I had some questions.
to approve, and Supervisor Johnson.
Mr. Osuna, we used to have 4 deputy county managers. Now we have 13 directors, I believe. We seem to be creating a lot of directors, and we're just changing the names. And I guess my only caution to the board is we created another division today. These things are always all coming after you and myself approved a budget. Now we're reorganizing, and I don't care what you say, when you start changing people's names, the pay comes pretty quickly because everybody thinks there. And while I'm not saying anything about procurement per se, but some directors, because of the amount of work they have or the amount of people they have underneath them, probably, require more money to do that job. And just because everybody's a director doesn't mean they should all make the same amount of money. That's all I had.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. Supervisor Moss.
When it came to the reorganization, my understanding, this is purely by memory, so I'll be off by a few tens of thousands, but the reorganization and getting rid of the deputy county managers saved the county something like $300,000, give or take.
Correct.
We're talking about $15,000 of that to recognize a missed component. So the overall savings to the county were and remain quite significant.
Still quite a bit over $250,000, yes.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, to answer that, it seems like every time we at the county do something, we save money, or at least that's the report that we get as the Board of Supervisors. And I have my doubts about how much money we're saving the taxpayers.
If I could, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Moss.
This is the spirited public debate that we're supposed to engage in. I think the revenues of the county are actually $1 million less than they were last year, and we still managed to find the money to give a pay raise, which I think is objective evidence that we are saving money, we are squeezing our pennies, and we are making our bucks count.
And I just want to make
Supervisor Angus.
one more statement, and I do agree with the promotion of the manager to director of the procurement. My only issue, and I know I stretched it, is that what we do for one part of this county, I want to make sure we're doing for everybody. And sort of the optics of it, to me, doesn't look that way. And so that was why I brought it up, and that is what I'm going to decide my vote on.
Yeah. If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor,
I agree with what Supervisor Angus said. There is the 1 mile above ground view does look like we are favoring a segment of our employee base, and that's the managerial segment. The response I would have to that is, one, again, only one employee is actually financially benefiting at the management level. And secondly, there is a process, and I would encourage each and every employee who thinks they are working out of their classification to request a review. I will also say this about this. I am deeply dissatisfied with the way we choose our winners and losers in this process, and I think we need to look at perhaps sometime very soon how we evaluate these matters.
thank you, Supervisor Moss.
I have one more comment.
Supervisor Brotherton.
We are an equal opportunity employer, and if we're going to have the merit rules, and as far as people not getting a raise for 5 or 7 years, they have not. Yes, people have become compensated for the work they've done if they're working out of their class. Because if we continue to have people working out of the class for the same pay as what belongs in another class, we could someday find ourselves in a lot of trouble. So we need to start the process of getting these things done fairly and equitably, and if we're going to keep the merit system, comply with that, and if we're not, then we need to do something else. But as long as that system is in place, people did not get a raise, an arbitrarily raise or a raise because their evaluation. They got a raise because they went to a different classification that was against the law for them to work there unless they got the compensation for that job. So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a lot more than just saying, okay, well, we're just giving somebody a raise, or we didn't give somebody a raise. There's just a lot more to it than that. And I have volunteered and told department heads and directors, I will work with you. We will start doing spreadsheets. We will see what we can do about this compression so that everything can be done equally and fairly. That is my number one project for this coming year, hopefully. And I will be willing to help with any department head, any director in trying to cause this to come about. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brotherton. Any further discussion? There being none, I would suggest that we do a roll call vote. Clerk of the board.
Supervisor Johnson.
No.
Supervisor Brotherton.
Yes.
Supervisor Moss.
Yes.
Supervisor Angus.
No.
Chairman Watson.
Yes. Item has been approved. Item number 37. This may be a long item, and I'd recommend that we take about a 10-minute break. Ready for that?
Yeah. Yes.
10-minute break.
Okay. I'm going to start getting too loud.
reconvene this meeting. Before we get started on item number 37, I overlooked a portion of our agenda, and that was committee reports, legislative report, administrative report, and the approval of the minutes. Do we have any committee reports? Do we have any legislative reports? Do we have an administrator's report?
None today, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I need a motion for the approval of minutes of November 26th and April 1st of 2013.
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Supervisor Angus and a second by Supervisor Moss for the approval of the minutes for November 26th and April 1st, 2013. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried, and I do apologize for that oversight. Item number 37, discussion, possible action, provision for an update on the Mexican gray wolf management plan, the possibility of memorandum of understanding, and cooperating agency status and responsibility and roles. I'll make a motion for discussion.
Second.
And seconded by Supervisor Johnson. I'll start the conversation off with a report from a meeting that I attended in Albuquerque of last week. We sat down with the U.S. Fish and Game and Wildlife people that are proposing this expansion plan of the Mexican gray wolf, and we gave those individuals the actual demand from Mohave County that we make modifications to the memorandum of understanding, that in essence we would not be a cooperating agency, we may be a coordinating agency. With that demand and other demands, there was a subsequent meeting held this last Thursday in St. John's, and I'd like to ask either Supervisor Angus or Supervisor Brotherton the proceeds of that meeting. Supervisor Brotherton?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we attended the meeting, and it was very interesting. And there was a lot of discussion about being a coordinating entity rather than a cooperating. And they are taking some of the language back. They're trying to incorporate it maybe into the MOU. Whether we get approval on that or not, we really don't know. But we have made it very clear that we do not want the gray wolf in Mohave County. And so right at the end of the program, I asked Sherry, I said, Sherry, am I correct in that there are no wolves now in Mohave County? And she said, that is correct. I said, and is it correct that you have no plans to drop them off in Mohave County? And she said, that is correct. But they do have plans to drop them off right in our backyard, kind of between I-40 and I-10. And I did point out to her that the wolves can't read, and so they can't tell when they're migrating out of their area. And that is a concern for us. But at least I was very encouraged that there had been some kind of progress made in listening to the dialogue and what could be maybe made a little more palatable for the counties that are very concerned about their ranching industry, their hunting industry, wildlife in general. So I think we've made some progress, and hopefully we'll be getting something back from them sometime this week.
Thank you, Supervisor Brotherton. I've invited several members in the audience to speak today, and we have a rancher currently in Mohave County that has experienced the actual Mexican gray wolf management plan. And I'd like to ask Scott Derringer to come to the podium and answer a few questions that I've got for him. Maybe Linda would like to come up too. Morning, Scott.
Morning.
One of the main issues that I was concerned about in my travel to Albuquerque to speak with the U.S. Game and Wildlife Service was the way in which the ranchers were remunerated for their loss of their cattle by the Mexican gray wolves. And I know you've had some losses on your ranch down on the Blue. Could you tell us how difficult it is to get reimbursed for an animal that you lose to the Mexican gray wolf?
Well, the best example I have, and it was one of the first wolf depredations that we found, and I was riding in the morning, and we'd had a little snow. It was late snow. It was long in April, but of course that's higher elevation and more moisture in that country. But anyway, I started seeing wolf tracks, and then where a cow and calf had been going up this flat, and pretty soon there's some blood, and the calf's dragging in. Anyway, and then I found the kill, and so they were coming that day. The Animal Services man, which used to be the animal damage control for the federal government, he was supposed to make the calls on the depredations, whether it was a wolf or a mountain lion or bear or whatever. So I knew they were coming to look at a dead bull I had, and so I took them right to the kill fresh, and I hung the calf in a tree, and so they looked it all over, and we took the carcass home and skinned it, and there was no other tracks or no other sign there. So they said, well, it's not conclusive enough to make a call on that to compensate you. And of course, the government didn't at that time, the Defenders of Wildlife were the actual group that was supposed to compensate us, and they didn't have a representative there. But so I said, well, there's no other sign but wolf tracks there. You guys are supposed to be the experts. They said, what did it if it wasn't a wolf? And they said, well, it could be eagles. I said, well, an eagle would make a track in the snow. And that's pretty much the way it went. We finally got paid for one half of one calf, and we had 20. That's when we moved to Mohave County. But we had, before we got out of there, we had 48 cows we had bought in the late winter, early spring. They either had a calf by their side or they were heavy bred, which means they were like in the third trimester ready to have a calf. Anyway, we lost 20 calves out of that bunch of cows. We kept them in a pasture close to our headquarters where we could keep an eye on things. And that's the way it went for us. It'd be hearsay what I heard from anybody else, but it's pretty much the same story with our neighbors.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Derringer. I wanted to make sure that our audience and our constituents knew how serious this can be. 20 animals out of your herd would represent about how many, the percentage of loss would be pretty great,
yeah,
I would
imagine.
imagine.
At that time we had, close to 300 cows, but this was the first pack of wolves that they brought into that area, and that was right after the release. And we had 2 more. We lost more in other places too. I could go on all day, but the guy that was in charge of making the judgment call for the Animal Services, I took him to, they saw us from the air. They saw this bull that had died, and they said, we want to put lime on the bull and put tarps over him so he'll decompose and the wolves won't get a taste for beef, which they already were eating calves. But so it was, the Forest Service they keep that road closed through the spring till it dries out. There's no way, if we took any kind of a vehicle in there, we'd be in big trouble. But anyway, I told him that, and I said, I'll furnish you a horse or whatever. And he said, no, we'll take quads. And he said, that's what I like about this job. I can go through anybody's lock gate and anybody's land and do my job. And that's basically the attitude we got from him. And like I say, I could go on the rest of the day, but I don't know what you want to hear. But
I'll ask the board if they'd like to ask any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions of you, sir, but I've been on National Associations of Counties. We've been dealing with this for quite some time, and your story echoes what we've had testimony on from pretty much every other rancher who's ever shown up, that it gets to a point where it doesn't even make sense to even apply for the reimbursement because they're not going to give it to you anyway. So many of the ranchers have just given up on even applying for restitution from the government.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. Any other questions for Mr. Derringer from the board? I'd like to say a couple more things. And Scott, when I went to that meeting in Albuquerque, I've never met an organization as arrogant and as unprofessional as those people had towards the attitude that we were representing our constituents. And especially when it came to the significant loss at which the ranchers were experiencing and an absolute impossible way for remuneration. And I believe it's incumbent upon Mohave County to get involved in this process to make sure that if these damn things ever get here, that there is a way for our people to be remunerated for it. And forgive me for cussing, but I feel very determined to make sure that we'll make an impact on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yeah, that's good. That's been like 14 years ago, and I don't know if the rules are the same. At that time, the two outfits we were on, there was 20 acres of deeded land on one and 16 or so on the other. If a wolf was or wolves were attacking your livestock, if you were on deeded land, you could shoot them. And on any type of state BLM national forest, you couldn't. There wasn't a thing you could do about it. Oh, they did pay me. They came on our yard, jumped on our dogs. If we'd go to town, we'd have to pen our dogs all up where wolves couldn't get at them. You just don't know till you've been in the middle of it. But there's hardly any cattle. Northern Greenlee County, you'll have to hunt to find one cow there. Now people just got out and did whatever they could. But
well, we sure thank you for your testimony today.
Bet.
Thank you, Mr. Derringer.
Thank you.
Do we have John Cooley from the Arizona Game and Fish Department? I met with Mr. Cooley in Albuquerque at the meeting, and I invited him up today to speak. Thank you. Good morning, John.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you had mentioned, we were also at the meeting in Albuquerque last week and at the meeting in Apache County where I was able to meet Supervisor Angus and Brotherton. I just wanted to be here to first listen to obviously what the county is considering. That's something that's very important to the Arizona Game and Fish Department. At the direction of our commission, we've been asked to engage where appropriate and where asked. Again, why I'd like to maintain contact at least at a minimum with the county as we work through this. It's significant in terms of what's being proposed through the proposed rule on the 10J population, non-essential experimental population, and the modifications that you had referred to that they're considering. Of course, the department on its own, irrespective of any engagement, would, look very closely at these rules, and we're doing that now internally. But we're a public agency, and we view it incumbent upon us to engage where necessary with our constituents, and that certainly includes the counties and counties that could potentially be affected by this. The commission is still, in fact, at the September meeting, we're going to talk a little bit more because we're also finalizing our signing on with the MOU that you had referred to. We hope to get that concluded in September, but we do plan in the meantime in engaging in that development of the draft environmental impact statement. We view that as an opportunity to certainly have a seat at the table as they evaluate alternatives and look at those alternatives. There was some discussion at the meeting in Albuquerque last week, or week before last, I'm losing track of time myself here, about the idea of potentially a county proposal, quote unquote, or at least, some in the group had been thinking of looking at potential alternatives, and we're interested in that as well. And I guess I could just close by saying that in general, the department takes the view of, when it comes to wolves, that we're certainly concerned about their impact on game populations in Arizona. We feel there's some economic ripples potentially from that if things get out of control, and that's certainly something that's on the front screen of the commission and our constituents. We're also concerned about maintaining multiple use of public lands in Arizona, and that certainly includes providing, and especially in these rural counties, rural areas where livestock production seems to be a big piece of that equation, that puzzle. So I'm not sure what else I can speak to this morning, but I just, again, appreciate the invitation to join you today.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. Do we have questions for
I have a question.
Supervisor Angus?
Thank you very much for coming, and we did speak when we were in St. John's. And I just want to make sure I understood. The comment period for the EIS is over September 11th? Did I understand that correctly?
Right. There's several moving pieces here. Pardon me, Chairman Watson, Supervisor Angus. There's several things happening at once here. There are two proposed rules. The first involves delist of gray wolf nationally and listing of Mexican wolves as an endangered subspecies. The second proposed rule has to do with this non-essential experimental population designation or revision to that, because we're actually operating under a final rule now that involves this non-essential experimental population. Those two rules together, they're linked because of the administrative process tied to them. And the comment period for those expires, the comments are due October 11th of this year. Now, for the draft environmental impact statement, which is being done for the proposed 10J rule, or the non-essential experimental rule. I know I'm sounding like a bureaucrat here, sorry, but this gets very convoluted. So the draft environmental impact statement is tied to this new non-essential experimental population designation for Mexican wolf. Those comments are due September 19th of this year.
Have any further questions for Mr. Cooley? Mr. Johnson? Supervisor Johnson?
No questions, but no question, Mr. Chairman, board members, but I just went back through some of the old numbers that I had, and this is just from Idaho to give people an idea. I don't read the people's, Albertsons, these are all ranchers. This is in 2007, they claimed 2 calves. Another rancher claimed 1 cow, 17 calves. Next one cow, 3 calves. The next rancher, 26 cows, 1 yearling heifer and 1 bull. The next one, 10 calves, 3 yearlings. 10 cows, 18 calves. In that year, they removed 16 wolves were removed from the area. Another one claimed 16 cows, 27 calves, 4 cows, 4 calves. This is all in 1 year. 6 cows, 2 calves, 4 cows, 13 calves. 2 cows, 3 yearlings, 8 calves, 1 cow, 2 calves. 16 ewes, those are sheep, 40 lambs and 1 buck. 5 cows, 20 calves, 4 calves, 2 yearling heifers. 1 steer calf, 2 calves, 23 calves, 1 cow, 32 calves, and 1 horse, 4 cows, 6 calves. It goes on. This is all from 1 year in Idaho. And the extent of it is because they usually look at, and all the ranchers know, they have usually about a 1% loss a year. And once the wolves are reintroduced, the losses just go up and up, and they're not being reimbursed. And it's tough anyway, just for a rancher to make a go of it, and, especially in our county. So, we support them as much as we can, but just to show how serious the problem can get.
It is certainly a significant risk for those who are in the ranching industry. I'd like to ask Mr. Cooley, I understand, and I heard it, I believe, at the Albuquerque meeting that the wolf may prey on as many as how many elk per year?
Chairman Watson, we in the program Arizona Game and Fish Department has been a cooperator as a part of the work in Arizona related to wolf reintroduction since its inception. And we don't have really any hard and fast research data to support it, but we generally, as a rough figure, there has been some work in the field on that where they've tracked depredation rates on different wild ungulates. Elk is the preferred species, and I think the number they've been using kind of loosely is about 16 elk per year per wolf.
16 elk per year per wolf.
Yep, that's the kind of the rough guide.
That would represent one significant amount of dollars to Arizona Game and Fish Department if this program were to be implemented as large as they propose. And it would also make a significant impact economically to not only Mohave County, but the state of Arizona.
Correct. And again, that's one of the reasons why the commission, of course, is taking very strong interest in this proposed rule and its impacts to, well, not just to the department. I mean, there's a funding connection there, obviously, since the Arizona Game and Fish Department derives most of its revenues from the sale of hunting licenses, fishing permits, things of that nature. But also just the impact to all the ancillary businesses that are tied into outdoor recreation and hunting in particular. So.
I have one more question.
Yes, Supervisor Angus?
Is the county doing anything to organize something with the citizens for this comment period? It's a very important part of this process, is to make sure that everybody gets their comments in this time, so that the organizations that are making the decision have enough information to make the right decision. And is there anyone at the county that's in charge of that?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Angus, staff, I don't have any knowledge of any effort by staff to do that. Staff would take direction from the board. If the board wanted us to participate or to try to organize that, that would be by direction of the board, so that y'all could certainly consider that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I can tell you that the September 19th deadline for the draft EIS comments that I had mentioned earlier is a concern of many, given the pretty quick turnaround on a very, very lofty and significant issue, especially to Arizona. There's an effort afoot right now working through agencies like our own, so we're not certainly alone in this, to see if we can get an extension to that. It's a decision ultimately that rests with the Fish and Wildlife Service, probably out of Washington, D.C., because of all the process that's tied in with this thing. But I wanted you to be aware of that. There's no promises that come with that, but I wanted to at least mention that to you. And then as it relates to any county effort and engaging with your constituents, your citizens, you know, we would be happy if you felt there's a role for the department to help with that, because it is a complex issue. There's a lot of information there, and if there's any value to us assisting to just help people kind of get their heads around the issue, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooley. I'm sorry, Mr. Hendricks.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I didn't want to indicate in any way that the staff wasn't doing anything in regards to this issue. On all the environmental issues that come up, especially the wolves issue, Development Services is taking the lead on drafting all our correspondence. We review it very thoroughly. Nick Hunt and John Montgomery and their people have done an outstanding job putting together the information for us and working with the federal government on making sure we're not signing any memos of understanding with the wrong language in it and making suggestions and bringing that to the board. But as for acting politically on our own, we haven't done that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. And Mr. Cooley, thank you for coming up today and giving all the information. Really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
I do have one comment, Chairman.
Supervisor Bradley.
I noticed that some of the recommendations that were made by Mohave County, I think maybe Mr. Hunt and Mr. Latosky made some changes in that memo of understanding, and those changes actually were incorporated in that MOU.
Right.
I saw the changes that had been made and made with your suggestions, so I was real pleased to see that.
Right, some of their suggestions and also the meeting in Albuquerque, they've taken those under consideration too. And until we get a return information on the memorandum of understanding and the cooperating agency status on that, I would recommend that we might possibly have an open hearing on this item for the public. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure.
And I'll make that in the form of a motion. Recommend that we have a public hearing concerning this issue next Monday. What would be a good date?
Whatever the day the chairman wants to have is open. Public meeting's fine with me.
All right, next Monday morning at 9:30 a.m.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a public hearing on the gray wolf issue. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, that appeared today to discuss this issue. Item number 38.
Motion for discussion.
We have
Second.
a motion and a second for discussion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Supervisor Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, this information was brought back and been distributed to all the board members, so whatever their pleasure is.
Thank you, Supervisor.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Pardon me?
If I may, Mr. Chairman. Did Mr. Osuna prepare the report that's attached to the backup data?
The backup data was supplied on this item?
Yeah,
It's there.
Right, I read it. I had a few clarification questions for Mr. Osuna, if he could.
Okay.
Answer
Mr.
them.
Osuna, would you?
Or OMB.
OMB
Not
did.
OMB, I'm sorry, Mr. Hepler.
There we go.
I'm just coming off the weekend, so I apologize.
Mr. Helpner.
As I understand the report, and I wanted some clarification to make sure I understood it correctly, that we have a system called Munis, which is our accounting program for payroll, and that you recommended that if we did go to timekeeping, we would have to have a system that incorporated into Munis so we could hopefully improve efficiencies in that area. But also, in order to prevent something that I saw was referred to as buddy timekeeping, that we would use a biometric system. Did I understand all that correctly?
Yes, Chairman Watson, Supervisor Moss, the system, there's many systems out there and depends on what you want to spend. One of the recommendations from the other counties that we were talking to in Maricopa particularly, they went to the biometrics. But still, in any system that you put in there, somebody's got to try to figure out how to get around it. But the time systems, the least expensive is using the ID card and a PIN number, which helps, which we would look at.
Now, I saw that the biometric terminals cost about $4,000. I'm rounding up a couple dollars per terminal. Was that accurate?
Yes.
And that then you recommended 269 supervisor licenses. I didn't understand if that meant a terminal or that individuals could access the terminals and check the data. I didn't understand.
In the software that's provided by the different timekeeping vendors, you have to pay for licensing to be able to look at the time and attendance. So what you do is you pay for the licensing of an employee actually getting in there and putting input into it, and then having the supervisor or manager or director being able to look at it and make approval.
Okay. Is the $4,000 for a terminal, or is it for a license, or are they the same thing or different things? I was less than clear when I read those two paragraphs.
The
my understanding is the terminal and licensing are different parts. So initially what you're going to be paying for is paying to put a system in, and then you pay a yearly cost for the software, and then also a yearly cost for those people that get into the system.
And are all those costs included in the estimate of $230,000 per for the initial setup?
Yes.
And is that $230,000 based upon a biometric system or some other system?
It's not, let me check on that. I think it's not putting the total biometric in, it's just putting some biometrics, but it's going with a basic PIN system.
Okay. That's, one more thing. I understand your report, your conclusion was that some sort of committee would have to be formed to determine, basically to gather more information as to what would be the best and most effective system to deal with all the concerns that were raised regarding employee timekeeping.
Why we recommended a committee and putting together a group is a couple of the recommendations from the different counties that implemented a system is to get buy-in and not have a resistance to be putting a system in place.
Thank you, Mr. Appler.
You're welcome.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Johnson.
I guess you're only as good as what you did for me today, so we could ask Nathan to see if maybe he could get something from IT to cut down on our costs. But the system we have in place right now is a paper system, and this system is based on somebody, a supervisor and an employee, promising to work an extra day because everything is signed off and sent in on a Thursday when it includes that Friday. Is that correct?
Yes, and what the system usually does is there's corrections that are done, even though they put that in, they try to get all input in. I would have to refer to finance and how they do it, but the reviews that we've done, you do put your time and attendance in and then make an adjustment on an as-needed basis. What we're doing, the system we're using right now, if you look at the Fair Labor Standards Act, our system's okay to use the paper, and basically what the Fair Labor Standards Act is looking at is it's complete and accurate is what they look for.
Right, and I guess the only reason I brought it to the board is because other counties have gone to it, and for our liability issue where you have, some department heads that might force, people into working through their lunch hour or other times, and they're not compensated, and the way things go now, they can wait 2 years and then, file a suit against the county, and we end up, paying out, and it's not fair to the employees, nor is it fair for people who, abuse the system, maybe not putting in their 8 hours a day.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. Did we have anything for Mr. Daniels? Would you like to question?
Oh, I guess I took the shot at him, sure. Is that something that, possibly your group, who have been so good at coming up with other programs to save us money, might be able to do or not?
Well, I'd like to just bring you up to date on one of the initiatives that's in place now. Recently, we upgraded the version of Munis, which is our financial system. We're expanding the use of that system to include human resource functions as well. And one of the major changes that's coming is a product called Munis Self-Service. And basically what that product is going to do is it's going to give the county the ability to do electronic time card entry. So the paper process basically can be replaced with an electronic process. And by doing that, the advantages you get are you can wrap what's called workflow around the approval process. So let's say I'm employee A and I report to a supervisor. I can electronically input my time card into the system, and then the supervisor can electronically approve the time. So it's a little bit more granular and gives us more flexibility on approvals and tracking of the information, and it's more efficient because we're not wasting all this paper. We're not sending paper from all the buildings in the county to this building. So, electronic time cards is just one of the features that Munis Self-Service is going to give us. It's going to also give us the ability to do electronic benefit selection, electronic PTO requests, electronic access to direct deposit pay stubs, W-2s, W-9s. There's a whole wide variety of features and functionality that we're moving towards with Munis self-service. The first step of that process is to get human resources on board with that application. So that's what we're working on right now.
How long before that process comes out?
I don't have the specific timeline in my head right now. I know we have some meetings scheduled and some time set up with human resources to start implementing with their staff. So I can get that to you.
Oh,
if you
okay,
need it.
but the product is already out there. So we don't wait for Munis to get it done.
Right.
It's just
We
up to
own
us.
the product. We upgraded our existing version of Munis this year to 9.3, which is a requirement to get onto the self-service component. So we have this software. It's just kind of waiting in the wings. And, with any software product, it takes time to implement, train, configure, learn. And, relative to the time clock thing, that would be another product that we would have to implement to integrate with Munis. And, my recommendation right now would be, let us get our existing products implemented and train people on how we can take advantage of the efficiencies that we've already, paid to implement, because we're not even through that process yet. So, implementing a time clock solution would create additional, work. We'd have to learn the system, we'd have to administer it, configure it, we'd have to train everybody in how it works. So, it just adds another level of complexity to what we're trying to accomplish.
Is that something that you can, if, say, the board's will was to say we form a committee or whatever, would 2 months be enough time to come back with something, or?
I guess it would depend on what it is you want, to come back from that committee.
Well, you're talking about you've got a new program that's to upgrade HR for PTO, all these sorts of things, and the idea of if there is some kind of, you're talking about a timekeeping system as a component of that also, where you can look at that and come back to the board saying this is the direction we need to go. If the board decides that's the direction we want to go, whether departments like it or don't like it, doesn't really make a whole lot of difference.
Right. If the board's will is to implement time clocks, obviously we're going to work to implement time clocks. I'm just saying that, the county is already moving forward with a product that's going to move us from paper to electronic time card. Now, electronic time card entry is not time clock. Time clock is a whole separate ballgame. Electronic time cards essentially is replacing the paper with an electronic process. And that doesn't have to be countywide, like some areas of the county where you have people that don't utilize computers, road workers, maintenance people, they can still fill out paper time cards and give them to their secretary or someone in their department that can do the electronic entry for them. So, we're working towards that direction, but, at this point in time, I'd say we're not really truly ready for time clock.
Right. I think, at least my idea was from what you were saying, you have this Munis has a program that could make things better for us and better for the employees and everybody else. And that's what I was thinking, if it gave you 2 months to come back and say, this is what we have and this is where we're at today, and we think that,
Sure.
this is a good idea to do something else or add on to it. That's all I was asking.
Yeah,
about.
oh yeah,
Not
for
just
sure.
specifically for time.
Yeah, definitely, we can come back with a recommendation.
Any other questions for Mr. Daniel?
I have another question for Mr. Hepler.
Okay.
Mr. Hepler, I saw on the materials, again, I think I referenced before, it was a $230,000 initial cost and then a $39,000 per year maintenance fee that this biometric system would cost. Is there any indication that we would make up that money or more because of savings, because of buddies chucking in for each other, things of that nature? And is there a return on that to justify that expense that you saw?
There's always got to be some approximate savings in doing this, but I think one of the things that Nathan did discuss was the fact of where we're going with the Munis system, and then getting that on board, getting that up and running, and then looking at some type of time and attendance or timekeeping that connects to that Munis if the board wants to go that route.
And I think that's where I'm getting at for this future expansion that's being, I'll call it an expansion that's being considered, is if when you're doing your study or your committee is doing your report, if you can give us at least a ballpark idea of how much money it would save us to go to time clocks, so we would understand the cost benefit that we're faced at that point in time.
Yes, but we also need to look at the possibility of increased cost when you start looking at correct attendance and time, where you're going to probably see some overtime and stuff. So you're going to have to weigh both factors to make sure time and attendance is proper. Thank you.
Oh, I had one person signed up to want to speak to this issue, Frederick Williams.
My name is Frederick Williams, live at 8331 West Oatman Road, Golden Valley, Arizona. Morning, Chairman Watson, supervisors. I'm highly opposed to this time clock idea. First of all, we're trying to save money, and here you're talking about going into hundreds of thousands of dollars spending on time clocks. We don't know how many time clocks you're talking about. Is every supervisor going to have a time clock in his office so his employees can clock in and out? To me, it's an insult to the employees of this county. You have good, honest workers. If the foreman of a crew can't see who is coming in late all the time, then you need a new foreman. I can see if you put these time clocks in, the crews lining up to wait till 8 o'clock and then all start punching in at 8 o'clock. One is going to be on time, everyone else is going to be late. If you have an employee that needs to go out on overtime or come in and work on a Saturday, you don't need a time clock for that. We don't need this expense. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
No questions?
If we have no more discussion, I'd make a motion to refer this to staff to come back in 2 months, once to check out the new system to see exactly how these things, not only the time clock, but PTO and all these issues are progressing, and whatever recommendations they can come up with.
Second.
We have a motion by Supervisor Johnson and a second by Supervisor Moss to refer this issue to staff, come back to us in a couple months. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carried. Item number 39, discussion possible action. Item number 58 from the Board of Supervisors meeting on February 6, 2012, as it relates to the audit of consolidated courts as compared to the cost of operating all justice courts. Supervisor Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, if you want, we can, I know the hour's getting kind of late, we can carry this over to the next meeting if you want. I'll make a motion just to continue the next meeting.
I'll second the motion. We have a motion from Supervisor Johnson, seconded by Supervisor Watson, to carry this item over to the next meeting, item number 39.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I notice that we have a considerable number of judicial officers sitting in the audience. Perhaps it might be wise, or at least polite, to ask them if they would be opposed to carrying this over, because we're taking a lot of guys off, a lot of men and ladies off the bench, and we'll be doing this again next month if we were to postpone it.
Thank you for my oversight. Is there anyone from the judicial system that would like to speak to carrying this over for another month? Kip Anderson in the... Judge Gertler and Kip Anderson.
I've been advised by the limited jurisdiction presiding judge, Judge Davis, that they are opposed in light of the fact that we do have several judicial officers here today. I would likewise point out that unfortunately, I will not be able to attend the first meeting in October. So if you're going to push it off too far, you know, it's a drain on time today, and if you are going to push it off, I want to make sure it's before the October 2nd meeting. Because to be frank with you, we're really not quite sure what you want to do with this. I mean, the report is what the report is, and I mean, we may have some disagreement with some of the findings, but for all intents and purposes, it is the report. And I am unsure. I have heard, gee, should we be combining the Kingman Municipal Court and a consolidated court? I've heard, are we going to be looking at, you know, should we be keeping the Lake Havasu consolidated court or not? To be frank with you, the judicial officers really have no idea what you want to do with this report. If it's a discussion about the report, that's one thing. If you're looking at court operations, you know, that's a whole nother issue, and we would certainly like to have some identification of what the issue is.
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Moss?
Judge Gertler, if this were to be continued, whether it was a week or 2 weeks or a month, did it help the courts if the drafters of these report or this board or the county administrator gave you a specific issue that was being looked at so you could formulate a proper response, if any, was needed?
Well, certainly that would help. The only problem is that it doesn't turn around and, you know, take or get rid of the issue, the fact that I've got 4, you know, justices of the peace and a limited jurisdiction court administrator that has been sitting here all morning waiting to address the board on this report. We've lost that time. I mean, the major concern is obviously processing cases, and they're not processing cases because this matter had been agendized.
Let's do it then.
Supervisor Angus?
Then while we're here, let's do it.
Okay. Well, we do have a motion, I believe, and a second on the floor. Is that correct?
Do we have a motion in a second?
And that
The motion to
that was to postpone.
Okay.
Motion was by Supervisor Johnson, and Chairman Watson, you seconded the motion to continue.
Correct.
Continue.
All right, we'll have to go through this edit here. So those in favor signify by saying aye. Those in favor, and those opposed?
Opposed?
No.
Oppose.
Opposed, okay. That motion has failed, so we will now entertain a motion for discussion.
So made.
Second.
We have a motion made by Supervisor
second.
Johnson and a second by Supervisor Moss to discuss this item.
I have a question, Chairman.
Supervisor Brotherton?
Judge Gertler, is the system the way it is now working okay? I mean, is there a need for a change, for some change?
Are you referring to the consolidated court in Havasu, or are you concerning the courts altogether?
Well, the consolidated court, from what I understand, if you're talking about Lake Havasu, that is kind of a consolidated,
That is a consolidated court.
a court. Okay, and it's working okay? I mean, it's working fine?
As far as the court is concerned, I certainly shouldn't speak for Judge Kalui or Judge Davis, and I would invite their comments, but as far as the court is concerned, it is working out extremely well. In Lake Havasu, we did have the good fortune of obviously having a structure that allowed us, you know, to have enough space for the clerks, have enough space for the judges, you know, the courtrooms to be able to handle matters, and it does provide, you know, obviously coverage for one another. If, for example, you know, Judge Davis is at a seminar, you know, Judge Kalui can cover, and vice versa. And so to a great extent, you know, that would be beneficial if we would be able to do that, for example, with the Bullhead Justice Court in the city of Bullhead City. It would be beneficial if we could do that for the city of Kingman and the Surbat Kingman Justice Court. The problem with that, obviously, is that, you know, it takes two parties to dance. And the city of Bullhead City, years ago, had indicated they had no intent or desire to form a consolidated court. And obviously, the second, you know, function or problem would be
with respect to location. Where do you put them? I mean, we do not have room in either Bullhead or in the Surbat-Kingman Justice Court to, consolidate those courts, even though there could be efficiencies that could be obtained if we did have consolidation. So it would be a very significant outlay of, capital to be able to, take those two particular, I say two, would be three with the Surbat-Kingman Justice Court and combine it with the City of Kingman and Consolidated Court, and likewise with the Bullhead Justice Court and the City of Bullhead. And we do have a consolidated court with North Canyon. The Colorado City Magistrate is also the Justice of the Peace in North Canyon. So we do have two consolidated courts.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Moss?
Mr. Hendricks, I don't see there's a recommended motion associated with this item. Is this just an informational item, or is it an actual action item for the board?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Supervisor Johnson?
Good.
I'm just saying, and Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Moss, I believe this was a request from Supervisor Johnson previously to have this study completed on consolidated, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you place the OMB underneath the Board of Supervisors, you provided them with the authority to agendize items like I have. So this was agendized through Supervisor Johnson and the study done by OMB. And short answer, I didn't put the item on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
President Johnson.
it's just coming back. The state said that we should go to consolidated courts. The only one besides the North Canyon has been Lake Havasu. We have had since then remodels to many of the other, Bullhead being one of them, where we didn't follow the direction of the state that said that would be an easier way. And what it does is it makes it easier for the citizens because they don't know if they got cited by the Muni Court, the Justice Court, or if they got to be in Superior Court, what court they're going to. So it was confusing to them. And so we brought this up to show exactly how much savings we had the study done to see if at all savings could be done for the citizens and everybody else by consolidating the courts, and that's what this report is. We're just accepting the report for what it is. It shows that I can't pull up my numbers right now for some reason. I can't open my disk, but the savings by the number of people that we have running one consolidated court as to running numerous courts. I think that's all it is, Supervisor Moss.
Chairman Watson.
Thank you.
Chairman Watson, may I address the board? Supervisor Johnson is very correct. I mean, I have Division I of the Superior Court. My judicial assistant is flooded with calls every day about, getting in a court date, and inevitably it's a traffic ticket, and the question then becomes, was it in the city of Bullhead City? Was it, in the county? You need to discern, is it the municipal court? Is it, the Justice Court? Because it is not a Superior Court matter. And so Mr. Johnson, Supervisor Johnson is very correct. There is a great deal of confusion on the part of the general public on where they need to go from a court standpoint. Again, the issue truly is with respect, and again, I agree with Supervisor Johnson that there are efficiencies with respect to consolidating the courts. However, in Bullhead City, unless they change their attitude, they do not want to consolidate. End of story. Here in Kingman, I'm not sure if the city of Kingman would like to consolidate or not. The problem is they have a full-time magistrate, they have a pro tem that covers quite frequently. We're literally at 100% capacity at the existing Surbat-Kingman Justice Court. Where would we put them if we were going to consolidate? That is the practical reality of the problems, because otherwise the court, and it is the court, it is not the board that determines court operations. And in fact, there was an agreement that was signed by county manager years ago with the clerk of the court, Verlin Tunnell, that addressed a similar issue, that it is the court that would determine its own operations. And the point that I'm having here is that if the board would like us to look into that, I would take the matter to the limited jurisdiction judges. We would determine if there is a consensus, and then we would approach the city. However, again, the practical realities are, one doesn't want to do it, at least that's their stance, and where do we go with respect to the other one?
That's exactly how I see it, Judge. And I think this is an item that we certainly needed to look at, but until plans were made for a judicial center in which it would be logical to re-examine this item for maybe possibly the City of Kingman consolidation, or if larger facilities were being built in Bullhead City for that consolidation. But I see this as a report. Possible money savings could be done on it, but at this time it makes it somewhat impractical. So.
Well, yeah, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. I just wanted to bring it up, and we've asked these numbers before because we've had, especially with the Bullhead courts, we've had problems with the Justice Court where the elected justice decides they're not going to do civil cases, and we have to hire pro tems to do all that work because they refuse to do what they're elected for. But I think the Havasu Justice Court has been formed for, unless I've made a mistake, 14 years now? Something like that, Judge Davis? 14 years, and we've made no attempt to consolidate the other ones. That's either the board says we'd like to see them consolidated because that's what, you know, the bosses down in Phoenix said they thought would be a great idea, or we don't, because if we just continue to go on this way, we're going to have one and not any place else. That was all. Because we're still building a justice court, and then we have a superior court, and they're not, even our own people aren't together. So in the future, we should be looking to either consolidate them or say, hey, we're not going to, and let all the judges go on their own.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson.
Would any of you like to speak? Are you comfortable with the presentation? Okay. Again, it's difficult sometimes when you're speaking for someone else when you haven't had an opportunity to understand and know what we need to address up front.
Precisely. I agree to that. I would recommend to the board that we accept the report from the management and audit team and use that as information for down the road if and when we do build a law and justice center.
Does that need to be in the form of a motion? Because if so, I can put it that way.
I think we can just let it, there's just a motion for discussion at this point. If there were no motion for actual action, this could die for lack of a motion and a lack of second. And we could just, if you wanted to make a motion, you could accept the report. Which is fine.
Well, I make a motion to accept the report.
We have a motion and a second by Supervisor Angus to accept the report.
And the qualification was there that no further action to be taken on it?
And no further action.
Okay.
Correct.
Excuse me, Chairman Watson, may I please address the board?
Certainly, Judge.
I would like to, state for the record that the current Justice of the Peace in Bullhead City is Jack Christie, and to the best of my information and knowledge, he is not utilizing pro tems to solely handle civil matters. Former Justice of the Peace, Tom Brady, I believe, attempted to do what the rules specify, and that is criminal cases take priority, and he would try and push the criminal cases through when it came to the civil cases, which have a lower priority. Many times that would get assigned to a pro tem if he was on, for example, a vacation or at a seminar. So it's not that he was not handling civil cases, but it could appear that way with respect to the pro tem coverage.
Thank you, Judge Gertler.
Thank you very much.
Any further discussion?
No, the only thing is it had nothing to do with Judge Christie. This was Judge Brady, and all you have to do is look at the caseload and see that there were no civil cases going through Judge Brady to find out who was paying for them.
Okay, there being no further discussion, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 40. Discussion, possible action regarding acceptance of donations for business sectors from the government, private individuals, nonprofit agencies with a total amount of $56,500 cash in donations of 1,200 in-kind contributions for the Coyote Coalition Youth Team, Youth Summer Program 2013, and authorize the chairman of the board to sign the letters of these sectors, acknowledging the value of their contributions to Mohave County's workforce development program. Motion for discussion?
Yes, I make a motion to discuss.
I'll second the motion. We have a motion and a second for discussion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Supervisor Brotherton.
I think Ms. Dranzo might have something she'd like to say to us. If that's possible.
Ms. Dranzo?
Supervisor Brotherton, members of the board, good morning. I would like to thank the Board of Supervisors for supporting our Coyote program for all these years. And just to let you know, our Coyote program is one of the state-of-the-art program in the state of Arizona. It's one of the best practices, and primarily because we are able to generate this partnership with a lot of our community members. We would not been able to help a lot of the youth for the summer program if we only dependent on the federal funds that we are receiving. But since we get donations from the private sector, government sector, and all our other partners, be it cash or in-kind, we're able to get a very vibrant Coyote program. And by putting this on the agenda and accepting these donations, it is an acknowledgement of this partnership that's very important to be able to run our program for this summer. And in that, I also thank the board and county management for their support for our Coyote program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dranzo.
I have a comment.
Supervisor Brotherton.
You know, Ms. Dranzo, I want to compliment you on this program and the management thereof. I've met several of the Coyote members, and I think they're just wonderful. They're enthusiastic. You know, they just really are so excited about doing what they're doing, and it was so refreshing. And they're very, very smart kids. Believe me, I was just extremely impressed, and I thank you very much, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of that. I was just very, very pleased to be a part of that.
Thank you, Supervisor Brotherton. I think I have a very good team, the Workforce Development Division headed by Jan Miles. They are a very good team that go out there and work with the private sectors and the government sectors to get these donations. By the way, these donations go directly to the stipend of the kids. Not one of the single penny that we generate goes to administration of the program. We use the federal funds to administer the program, but all the donations we generate by working with the sectors go directly to the stipend of the kids. And this is one way of preparing them for the future. They are our future workforce, and therefore this program is very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ransom. Supervisor Moss.
Mr. Ronso was very pleasant and very polite and invited me to the Coyote program awards ceremony in Lake Havasu, and I will observe, just as much as Supervisor Brotherton observed, is when you see the collection of kids that are involved in the program, it gives you a lot of hope for the country. I encountered future newspaper editors, authors, attorneys, engineers, and a medical doctor, a surgeon to be specific, in that crowd, when they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and it was a good feeling.
Great. Thank you.
It was a great support from all the members of the board for the summer. Thank you.
And we thank you, Mr. Ranso, for such a wonderful and important program.
So I will make a motion that we accept the donation from business sectors, government, private, individuals, and nonprofit agencies with a total amount of $56,500 cash donation and $1,200 in-kind contributions for the Coyote Coalition Youth Team Youth Summer Program 2013, and authorization of the Chairman of the Board of Supervisors to sign letters to these sectors acknowledging their valuable contribution to Mohave County workforce development programs.
Second.
We have a motion of Supervisor Brotherton and a second by Supervisor Moss to approve item number 40. Any further discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Item number 41, discussion and possible action regarding the Desert Hills Fire District Board not being able to fill its legal responsibilities. Mohave County Board of Supervisors direct that an administrator be appointed to conduct the affairs of the district and to make recommendations on the future district matters to the Board of Supervisors. Staff is directed to engage D. Moscow, head of the Desert Hills Fire District Auxiliary, to prepare and evaluate the necessity contracts and documents which would be at a minimum provide for reimbursement of any expenses incurred by the liability of the district or otherwise, pending the appointment or election of an appropriate board for the Desert Hills Fire District. Further authorize the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the district and the county providing for reimbursement for the costs of the service from the tax revenue of the district.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for discussion.
Second.
We have a motion by Supervisor Moss and a second by Supervisor Angus for discussion on the fire district.
If I may,
Supervisor
Mr.
Moss.
Chairman. What's essentially happened for the edification of the public is that 2 of the 3 members of the Desert Hills Fire District's board has resigned, leaving them with 1 member. This isn't an equivalent of what happened with the Lake Mohave Ranchos Fire District. Is, as I understand it, the fire district in Desert Hills is financially okay, not great, but self-sufficient. It's just an administrative issue. And this is put on the agenda for purposes of appointing a temporary administrator until such time as this board can get around to appointing replacement board members. And I will apologize to Ms. Moscow because I misspelled her name. It's actually a U at the end, not a W there. But it occurred to me that Ms. Moscow knows that fire district inside and out, and whether it's a couple weeks or a month until we get into a position that we feel comfortable appointing 2 replacement board members, that she would be a very cost-effective solution to the problem, as she doesn't want any money. She just loves the district.
I have a question. Yes, okay, now, can we appoint, and this is a legal question, I'm sure. Can we appoint members to that board, or do we have to have an election?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Brotherton, in reviewing this over the weekend, I think the plan that Ms. Moscow has presented is a good one, where she would serve as the administrator. She has all the authority of the board.
Very good.
So that she could, at a subsequent meeting, fill those positions on behalf of the board, or fill at least one of them on behalf of the board, allowing the board then to conduct business. And that's the streamlined way of doing it. And looking through the statutes, the Board of Supervisors has the authority to appoint the administrator, but can only declare that they have to have a future election to fill the board seat. This will be able to accomplish this without the need of an election, spare the cost of that, and move the district forward. So I think the recommendation she submitted is a reasonable one. I think the questions she chooses to ask at this point in time are reasonable as well. And that's within her authority as the appointee of the board.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Ekstrom on that. You're telling me that the previous, this is still fire district, I guess, we've appointed a man to oversee another fire district. He is the one that's going to appoint those board members out there, if that's the way we decide to go?
They don't have any board.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Johnson, it's not the same factual situation, but I suppose reading the statute, because he can act as the board, he could do that, which would spare them the cost of having an election.
I guess the questions I have, but this is a budget of over $1 million. I saw nothing here. Ms. Moscow might want to come forward, and I see nothing on her background to say, how you're qualified to handle a fire district.
Ms. Moscow, would you please come to the podium?
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Do you want me to make a statement, or I can answer any questions that you have?
I believe if Supervisor Johnson is just asking about
Yes.
your background and your vitae.
Well, my background as far as the county is concerned, I moved here when I retired from Chevron. My husband and I moved here. I'm sorry, my name is Dolores K. Moscow. I live at 3184 Irwin Lane in in the Desert Hills area, right outside of Lake Havasu City. We moved here, my husband moved here in 1984. When I retired, I moved here in 1985. Excuse me. And for 8 years, in the late 80s and early 70s, I served on the Planning and Zoning Commission of the county. And I am going to be president of the Desert Hills Fire Department Auxiliary for the third time. I'm going to do that. I'm doing that. I've also been president of the Desert Hills Community Association, and I have been president of our retirees group and area vice president for our the Chevron retirees group. I have been active in the Desert Hills community for the last, I always have to do the math in my head, pardon me. 28 years? I think I'm getting old. Anyway, I have known Matt Espinoza since I think he was about 19 years old. And I know a lot of people in the area. And one thing now unfortunately, I've heard several versions of what I'm supposed to do. An attorney that is one of the lobbyists for the Firemen's Association has advised me that the administrator is really the boss. And Mr. Ekstrom, whom I also contacted, said it probably wouldn't be more than a month, because what my primary job is we have had people in writing apply to be on the board, and we have those letters, and until we get an administrator assigned, those letters cannot be opened or read. And so I understand that I and the remaining member of the board, John Hayes, we will be the ones that will be doing that during the regular meeting that is scheduled for this coming Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning. I have prepared an agenda for that meeting, and it will be posted as it's legally supposed to. And since you people, the board, will really be our bosses until this is solved, you will get copies of everything that happens, and I understand that you have the final authority to accept the two that we choose. And I'm assuming if we can do that this week, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of when your next meeting is, but I'm assuming it could be on the agenda for the next meeting.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Moscow, the questions I have are, this is a tremendous responsibility, and I believe, and Attorney Ekstrom can jump in, but as the administrator, I realize there's one board member left, but that board member has no standing until the board appoints additional board members. That'd be correct, Mr. Ekstrom? So you would be... Right. That's the way it would be you. It's nobody else but you overseeing it.
Right, I realize this.
And you're responsible, I mean,
Right.
financially responsible too for
Right.
any mistakes you make, or anything
Right.
that comes in. But I know you've been involved, because you've been involved as long as I've been in office.
I know
Desert
you
Hills
have.
and the fire district. But these are financial issues. These are legal
Exactly.
things that have to be done. And do you have any background at all in that?
Well, I know, like I said, I've been in contact with the attorney that's a lobbyist for the Firemen's Association, and I think that he would probably help me, and I'm sure Mr. Ekstrom would help me, because I have known Mr. Ekstrom for a number of years also, and I'm willing to try. I mean, actually, if it's only choosing the two people to replace the ones that resigned, I don't think, as far as I know, we only have 4 letters to choose from. And I don't think that'll be a big possibility. I have been conducting meetings and doing things like this since I was in high school. So that part of it does not bother me. And taking the financial responsibility does not bother me. I hate to always say this, but one thing I don't have to worry about is money. So.
Well, but now you have the responsibility of, what, $1.3 million of taxpayer money.
Exactly. I realize
And there
that.
are there are things that go along with that. It's just the procurement issue. I mean, I read
Exactly.
minutes of meetings where Desert Hills Fire is using eBay to purchase equipment. That seems way out of line to me.
Right. Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And what I'm hoping to do is, when I look at the situation, I think the main problem, there are two problems really. The training that the that the board received was inadequate. I don't think they stressed enough the importance of the job and exactly what their responsibilities were for. And then the second thing, and that led to a lack of really good communication between the board and the chief and the secretary treasurer. I mean, and of course the biggest challenge to every one of us in this room is we are human beings, and as such, we are not perfect. I will say this, that since John Hayes is the other member of the board, and he and I have discussed this, because one of the problems that they've had was that there was a threat that the two that resigned would be reported to the state attorney general because they did some talking away from the meetings. And John and I have made a pact. We will not talk to each other ever again until the meeting on Thursday. He is president of the association. I am past president of the community association. We've already discussed. I will not attend meetings if this continues into October, because we don't want to make it harder for the people that are coming in. We don't want to leave anything bad behind. I have prepared a letter for the secretary treasurer, and I have prepared a letter asking for written instructions on how to handle our bank accounts, because several people have called the banks and verbally have been told different stories. As I said, we are human beings. So I'm requesting that the banks provide us with written instructions on how the bank accounts are to be handled, because I realize I am responsible. So, and as I said, I think the lack of communication or the lack of understanding of what the job entails has been the biggest problem. And I understand your question of me, Supervisor Johnson. You want to make sure I know what I'm doing, and I think I do. And I have several people that will help me. So
See, I think that's the problem is, I understand you have people that will help you, and I'm not, trying to pick on you or anything, but we're placing an administrator with our authority over a fire district that collects taxes from people. And there are laws that set how those things go, and you're saying you're going to need to ask other people for guidance, and that's what bothers me, because now we're appointing you, but you're getting information from other people.
But I'm only going to get information from people that know the laws better than I do.
I think there's a problem at Desert. I mean, I've never, seen 2/3 of a board quit before within 8 months.
Right.
Going back over the minutes, I see a lot of problems that
Exactly.
you know
I
very
realize.
well that we've gone through in that district.
Right.
A majority of the contingency funds that were out there,
Right. Exactly.
I think things need to be looked into, and while it has nothing to do with you, Ms. Moscow, but I think we have a Mr. Flynn, who we hired to look over the other fire department. He is very well versed in these sort of things.
Oh,
He
yeah.
hired a professional.
Right, I know that.
I have no problem bringing him in. It's not a slight
sure.
against you. I know your heart's been in.
Right.
I mean, you've been Miss Desert Hills as long as I've been there, done more for the fire department probably than anybody else, but I would rather see a professional come in who has no ties, who hasn't known the fire chief
Well,
since
that's
he was
fine.
19, to do this. That's all I have.
Well, I realize that. But as I said, I'm very willing to do it, but if you feel you'd like to have somebody that is a professional, that's fine with me. I mean, it's obviously, it's entirely up to the five of you what happens. But as far as when I was asked to do this, they were under the impression that all I would have to do would be to choose recommend two from the four that have applied to be members of the board. That's what I was told, that's all I have to do. But when I reread the law, I don't know about you, but I don't like reading laws. But I have read and read and read, and I understand what the responsibilities are. I also understand that the state legislature has passed a new law this spring saying that they've established a committee that is going to audit all of the rural fire districts in the state, and they are empowered, then they have to report by December 31st. That's a law I just found out about too. I also know that the law that was passed that established these boards in 2010 there was an error. And that error was not all of the fire chiefs and elected fire chiefs and secretary treasurers were crossed out. So the next legislature passed a law saying, establish a committee and we will erase all of those references because they're not supposed to be in there. They have not done that to this day. And I think that's one of the problems. When you read that law, when you read the actual law itself, you're not sure whether you're really talking about fire boards or still about an elected chief and elected secretary treasurer. And I think that's one of the problems, because all of the members of the board were religious about reading the law and making sure they knew what they were doing.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Just 1 second, please. I'd like to ask Ms. Moskow. Ms. Moskow, if this board were to entertain an agreement with Mr. Flynn just to protect our interest, the fire department's interest, and your interest, and we would certainly like to make sure that this goes forward, but I think that if our board were to decide to entertain an agreement with Mr. Flynn, I think everybody would be a little bit more comfortable.
And as long as he doesn't charge $1 million, I would be willing to pay for that.
Right. He's been very economical to this point. Supervisor Moss?
I wanted to make a couple points. One, this is not an issue where we have a fire district who has gone belly up like Mohave Ranchos. So the financial investment and the expertise that Mr. Flynn would bear to the table is not on point. What we have here is, based upon Ms. Moskow's comments, we had two members of the board who were violating the open meeting law, and they resigned because of that. We need to have a replacement board. There is no one in the Desert Hills community who is more knowledgeable, more involved, more aware of the needs of that fire district than Ms. Moskow. She is ideally situated for doing what's best interest of the community when it comes to getting a replacement board in place. When it comes to the financial issues, one, this would be a short-term appointment because she's going to basically make herself obsolete here in the very, very near future. And two, when it comes to financial issues, she'll be supported by a very able staff within the fire district. Then she'll do the exact same job, or excuse me, then for the short time, she'll do the exact same job that three other board members are doing who are not financial experts, which is reviewing their information, making decisions, and moving on. So we're not in a position, and this is Ms. Moskow's appointment, for requiring a financial expert. We're not there. We're in a community crisis, which involves a community member to put a temporary Band-Aid over a community problem at no cost to the district until they can get back to regular business with a community board. And it's going to be short-term. I mean, it's not...
What's the short term?
Well, whenever they can get, as I understand the process, and Mr. Ekstrom would be better situated to describe it, she, as an administrator, and she's very nicely involving Mr. Hayes, she doesn't have to, in the process, she will be making a recommendation of one or two board members, which will either she'll appoint directly herself, or which she'll bring back to the board for reaffirmation, and then she'll basically have put herself out of a job at that point, is my understanding. Mr. Ekstrom might have more information than, he certainly does have more information than I do on the point.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Moss, I think you're substantially correct, although I believe that she is running the board, she'll run the board just though she is the board, and that she can actually appoint a successor on her own, and then those two can get together and appoint a third person. Or she could appoint two, or appoint all three.
I can't.
So as I understand it, then, as of Thursday, if she makes these appointments, she's out of a job and a board's running it.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Bill.
That's right.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but John and I can recommend, but you are the five that have to make the final decision. And am I understanding correctly, Bill?
Mr. Chairman, that's not my understanding, but we'll work on that.
Okay.
I think the important thing is just to move forward with this issue.
Yeah.
My reading of the law over the weekend suggested that you were empowered to make that decision.
So we have a situation where it's either a 3-day gap or until our next board meeting gap. So we're looking at a 3 to 14-day gap before we remove Ms. Moscow for the equation and the board goes about its
Thank
regular
God for
business.
small favors.
So I think some thoughts might be we're making a little more of this than it actually is.
Okay. At this point, we only have a motion for discussion.
I have one more thing, Mr. Chairman. Now it's brought up that we're acting like this is not a big deal. This is taxpayer money. These are elected officials who step down, and we're the ones that are going to take over control of this by our appointment of administrator. I believe there are internal problems at this department, and there's been questions raised where by putting a professional administrator in, we'll solve these problems, plus just the growth between going from a chief and a secretary-treasurer to a board. That's tough at any time. I believe the people who have done the audits have, of the fire district, I mean, I supposedly received one from the person that did the last audit who says they have to report material weaknesses and internal controls defined by the standards. I think somebody like Mr. Flynn, who we already have on board who is qualified, can look at these things and put to rest something that might be out there. I have problems with buying stuff off eBay. I have problems with pay raises that were given, during the downtimes. I mean, these things are, there's a reason two people quit, and if there are, so it has, like I said, nothing against you, Dee. I've known you for years. It's just somebody who's familiar with the workings of a fire department, I think, can put everything to rest. But that was just mine.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. Supervisor Moss.
I agree 100% with Supervisor Johnson that this is a serious issue, considering the protection of taxpayer monies at one level. And the response to that is, in the Desert Hills community, I can't think of a more honest and trustworthy person than Ms. Moscow to put in charge in protecting the taxpayers' interest in this short-term transition period.
If I could make it, I'm sorry,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Watson, if I could make a suggestion, maybe if you could let us get 2 members of the board. And then if I could suggest that have Mr. Flynn do sort of an audit or I'm sorry, my head is shutting down.
That's quite okay. Mine gets kind of the same way about this time.
If he could do an audit of our books or just look at how we're doing things, and as again, if he doesn't charge $1 million, I'm willing to pay for it.
And with that, Mr.
much.
Chairman, I would like to make a motion.
Certainly.
I move that in view of the Desert Hills Fire District Board not being able to fulfill its legal responsibilities, that we direct that an administrator be appointed to conduct the affairs of the district and to make recommendations on future district matters to the Board of Supervisors. Staff is directed to engage D. Moscow, is that Dolores Moscow?
That's right.
Yeah, with a U, not a W at the end of her name, as to prepare and evaluate the necessary contracts and documents which would at a minimum provide for the reimbursement for any expenses incurred by the county in this process, as well as indemnification and protection for the county from any liability of the district or otherwise, pending the appointment or election of an appropriate board for the Desert Hills Fire District, and further authorize the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the district and the county, providing for reimbursement for the costs of service from the tax revenues of the district.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Also, we have two more people that would, or one more person that would like to speak to this issue. Michael Centofanti.
Yes, he was the judge.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the recognition, but after hearing her presentation, I support her and I withdraw my question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Centofanti.
We have discussion on that, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly. Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, the only discussion I have is once again to say that we have a person that we took, we gave our one fire department we've taken over, we got the best qualified person that we could find at the time, and now we're taking over another fire department. Doesn't make a difference what the reasons are. We are taking it over, and I think we're giving a disservice to that fire district if we don't give them the best possible. Somebody who was highly qualified. Ms. Moscow, there's nothing to say about her. She is a great volunteer, but she has no experience running a fire department. She's been retired for almost 30 years now. She's been involved in a lot of things with the fire department, but as far as knowing what the regulations are, handling the budgets, knowing procurement codes, those things she does not know, and I believe we're doing a disservice to the people and also to ourselves by giving control of a fire district to someone who is not qualified.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. I also have two more people that would like to speak to this issue. Mr. John Hayes.
Should I go sit down?
If you'd like, ma'am.
Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much for your volunteerism.
Mr. Chairman, Board of Supervisors, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is John Hayes. I live at 2369 Hyde Park Avenue in Desert Hills. I am the remaining board member who did not resign. Two members chose to resign, and my reason was to come and just introduce myself if you had any questions. Listening to the conversation, I just want to assure everybody in the audience, and as well as the supervisors, the Desert Hill Fire Department is still operating. They are still responding to calls, emergency calls, non-emergency calls. We do need to have a board in place to conduct some business. The firefighters are still getting paid. Nobody's in danger. I just want to make that perfectly clear. I've discussed this with the fire chief, and if anybody has any questions or if there's anything I can do to help, I'd be happy to. So, again, just to introduce myself.
Questions?
No, just to say thank you, Mr. Hayes, for sticking around. You're like the last Texan in the Alamo, it looks like.
Yeah, I don't know the reasoning. There are some issues, as whenever you make a change, things happen, and sometimes some people are slow to make change. A lot of things were being addressed. What we did do on the board, when we had the other two members, and I believe they truly and honestly had a desire to make it a good board and to serve the fire department, we were prioritizing. We had some things that we felt were priority issues, and some of the things were going to be addressed. The incident with the eBay card, I was not aware of that until it came up in a meeting. That was being addressed. There's a lot of other things that need to be addressed by the future board. And again, we're trying to prioritize and get things. So it's going to be a process because there is some changes being made. So.
I guess the one question I would have, Mr. Chairman, if I may, you've been on the board now since December.
Yes, sir.
Who's in charge of signing all the checks?
I signed the warrant checks for the payroll, and the Mr. Denny Burns, who was the chairman, was signing some of the checks, if you will, more for the purchases and things like that. We went to the bank. There's also an issue with the bank, a lack of communication between the bankers. We would go to get information or to do things, and they felt we weren't authorized, and so that was a lack of communication between themselves. We've kind of gotten that resolved. So I still have the ability to sign checks, and I sign the warrant checks, so I can assure you that I will continue to do that so the firefighters get paid, and we don't get a situation as happened in the other fire district that this county's basically running right now.
Right. Well, at this point, depending on what the county does today, if we take it over, then that authority will go to Ms. Moscow or whoever we appoint.
Yes,
So
I fully understand that. I have no problem with that. I think Mrs. Moscow is a wonderful person, and I applaud her for stepping up to the plate and volunteering to do this for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you.
We have another person who would like to speak to this issue, and that's Matthew Espinoza.
I was going to say good morning, but I guess it's good afternoon now.
Good afternoon, sir.
My name is Matthew Espinoza. I'm chief of the Desert Hills Fire Department. Basically, what we have here is it is a very serious situation. What we have here is due to the fact that 2 of our 3 board members resigned, we at this point cannot establish a quorum in order to replace them. Had 1 member resigned, then the other 2 remaining members would establish a quorum and appoint a 3rd member to replace them. Had the resignations been done staggered or at different times, then it would not have been an issue, and I would not be here at this time. Basically, what we are looking to at this time is put board members back onto our board in order so that we can establish a quorum. In order to do that, according to the law, is the county has to appoint an administrator who in effect becomes the board, at which point the process begins to replacing those board members. That's a relatively simple thing. Dee Moscow is a perfect candidate for that. She knows pretty much everything about our fire department, and she is very community and civic minded and very calm and rational, and she is very thorough in everything that she does. The process can be as long as she chooses to do it. If she decides to advertise again and get more applications or letters of interest, she can do that. Or she can go with what we have already as far as letters of interest and appoint those. Like I say, the biggest objective really here is for our board members to be replaced in order to get us back up to where we can establish a quorum and move on. I don't expect her to spend $1 million in the next month. Right now, we have deferred any purchasing aside from just the absolute necessary, like oxygen supplies and stuff like that, until such time that the board is basically on its own feet, and that goes for that.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions on this or further discussion? I have one item that I would just like to interject, and that would be to ask Ms. Moscow if it would be possible Yes, Ms. Moscow, would it be possible if today, if you were to be appointed the administrator, do you feel that you have the ability to contact Mr. Flynn?
Yes, I have his phone number.
Okay. And at the cost of your district, entertain Mr. Flynn on kind of a contingent basis, maybe
Sure,
by
and
the
I-
hour or
and-
something to that effect?
And if this is a problem for the fire district, I can pay for him.
Well, that's very gracious of you, but I think your district really should pay for it.
Oh, well, but, anyway, I offered.
Okay.
If I could, Mr. Chairman?
I have nothing further.
Okay. I would say that Ms. Moscow, based upon her comments today and the short time that I've known her and the reputation that she has in the community, she's going to do everything necessary, both
Right.
officially through the district and personally, to ensure that district functions smoothly, efficiently, within its budget, and in the best interest of the taxpayer. And that may or may not include calling Ms. Flynn, but I'm certain, Mr. Flynn, but I'm certain Ms. Moscow is the type of person who would do that if she felt the need for it.
Right.
Any further questions or discussion? There being none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Item number 42. Discussion, possible action, approve changing the title of the Office of Management and Budget Manager to Office and Management Budget Director at no cost to the county. And I'll make that in the form of a motion. There appears to be no second to the motion. Item is died. Item number 43, discussion and possible action. Retain Mr. Paul Lentowski to assist the Board of Ad County Attorney in addressing issues raised by the U.S. versus ARIA and authorize the chairman to execute the proposed retention agreement.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion for approval by Supervisor Angus,
I second the motion.
Nope, I defer to Supervisor Brotherton on that.
a second by Supervisor Brotherton. Yep, Supervisor Moss.
Do you have anything you
I
want
have
to
a
say?
question, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Johnson.
We didn't put a couple questions. We didn't put a maximum limit on this, and then reading the contract, shouldn't there be one point of contact? I understand that if you go ahead with this hiring, they'll be working with the county attorney's office, but it seems like it reads the county administrator, all board members have the ability to deal with this attorney, where I think we could run our bills up sky high unless we have one point of contact, whether it be the, or the chairman does it and then works with the county attorney, instead of having, you get different points of view from 5 different members. And
I think the original thought in this was that...
Supervisor Angus.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Chairman. I think the original thought on this was that Mr. Lenkowski would work with you and the county attorneys. It wasn't that we were all going to give our point of views to bring the whole issue with the state to fruition. That was, I think, the original intent.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Angus, I believe you're correct, and I don't think, I think Mr. Lenkowski will work with me under my direction, and will only provide those services which are necessary. Last meeting, we did not appoint a cap or establish a cap, a dollar amount. I don't know that that's necessary, but if the board would like to do that, you may do so at this point.
I think it's going to be I don't foresee it as being a very long process, because we're in the middle of a lawsuit that I think that we could do this through, as I understand it. So I think if it gets to that point, we can address it then.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Angus, certainly if the expenses get to a point where I feel they're verging on the unnecessary, unreasonable, I'll bring it back to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Exner.
Mr. Chairman, the question I would have then, if you're saying your understanding of the contract, but we have a contract that is up for approval today, which doesn't have those things in it. I'm not talking about the money. I'm talking about, can't pull mine up again, but I remember it was saying would be available to board members, county administrator, and then saying he could come to the board meeting if the county, or if the chairman gave him direction to show up. How do you plan on, Supervisor Angus was saying, that was her understanding the same you had, but this contract doesn't state that.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Johnson, I can make necessary change to the contract to accommodate the intent of the board simply by deleting the sections that require he communicate with all the board members. I don't think the board members care for that anyway. I will communicate with you to the extent that you need to know something and indicate to Mr. Lenkowski that that's the board's desire. I don't think he's hung up on that particular issue. He was just trying to say that he'll provide you a broad panoply of services, whatever you need, without selecting out one of you to be the contact. If I'm the contact, that's fine, I'll put it in the contract. It has not been signed by him yet, as far as I know.
Right, well, I'm just asking it.
Good
We
observation.
have a motion and a second to approve the contract, so we either change it now or we approve it the way it is. That was all. I don't want Supervisor Moss using his legalese to come back on us.
Mr. Chairman, whoever made the motion, I suppose, could
I wouldn't use my legalese to come back against the board, I promise.
I would like to leave the motion the way it is.
This is my thought, and this is just my thought alone, is we're entering into an attorney-client relationship with Mr. Lenkowski. All the burdens in that relationship are on Mr. Lenkowski. He owes us duties. We don't necessarily owe him duties except the obligation to pay. He owes us loyalty. He owes us confidentiality. He owes us good faith. He owes us everything. This is all the protection flows our way when it comes to those items. And so I don't particularly have a problem with the contract as written. It's very, very standard, very basic. And I thought Mr. Ekstrom and Mr. Lankowski did a good job putting it together. They didn't overcomplicate it, for which I come back with a contract last meeting, it was going to be a 20-some page document. I was impressed that you got it into, let's say, 3, 4, something like that. It was a good job.
Thank you, Supervisor Moss. Any further discussion? There being no further discussion, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
And I will be nay also. Item number 44, discussion and possible action, approve an organizational change as assigning the county administrator with the day-to-day supervision and oversight of the office of the clerk of the board. I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Johnson.
I think the only thing we have in statute is the clerk of the board that we appoint, who answers to us, not that we can't delineate that to someplace else. This board, we've decided to take on, OMB and risk management under our direct supervision, and now we're going to give away the one that we have statutory requirements for? I don't see that. That's our person. I see that as a checks and balances to keep the county administrator in line by having a clerk of the board that also represents us, especially doing with agendas and keeping things down. That's just my opinion.
Right, and as I understand it, that would not preclude our ability to change or replace the clerk of the board if the board so chooses. This has more to do with day-to-day oversight. Any further questions? Being no further questions, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay. I'm also a nay.
2 nays. Motion carried. And I believe that is the end of the meeting.
When are we coming back?
Call this meeting closed, and let's resume at 1:30. Will that give us sufficient time for lunch? 1:30 enough time for lunch?
I think so. I hope so.
Okay, okay.
We'll hurry.
Why, you said no to